everybody, and welcome to this special on the trine that builds empires. So yeah, I'm Imani, your holistic karmic astrological life coach, and I'm going to take you on this journey. So we have Jupiter and Saturn making a trine from August 2026 to July 2027 with 3 exact hits of this energy. So what does that all mean? Well, Jupiter says, have faith, expand, grow, believe that abundance is possible. And Saturn says faith without work is a fantasy. And, Jupiter and Saturn normally argue, Jupiter says grow, Saturn goes, restrictions, think about it, Hope, Jupiter crashing into reality, right? Saturn, vision, hitting the ceiling, attempts at growth collapsing without the structures, routines and daily habits to hold it. So as I said, from August 2026 through to July 2027, Jupiter and Saturn, well, they stop arguing. Jupiter Trine Saturn, 3 exact hits across 14 months. The faith, Jupiter's abundance gets the bones, the routines of Saturn's. The structure serves something meaningful instead of just maintaining tradition and order, right? The trine's danger though is that its energy can make everything easy, and we may miss the opportunity to use it. Squares in astrology push, oppositions force us to make a choice, but trines just flow. They're smooth, they're natural, they're effortless, right? So you can ride the Jupiter-Saturn trine across the 14 months and build nothing. But the best use of this energy, of course, is to build. And I'm going to give you strategies on how to do that, as well as, zodiac guidance for all 12 sun, moon and rising signs at the end of this part. This is going to be a 2 to 3 part because we're talking about a year worth of, analysis, right? So if you like my content, follow me wherever you listen and all of that good stuff. So you may feel the emotional resonance, mistaking the feeling for the work, and it's not the work only, the work, the action's the work, right? And then as you get to July 2027, because you did nothing, you realise that you've wasted it, right? Because trine energy just make us go with the flow, but the best use of them is to make the changes, right? So most people will experience the water trine from August 2026 to April 2027. As I'm emotional right now, so I must be processing something without actually doing anything with the energy. So, they end up journaling about it, posting about it, attending workshops about it. But none of this will build the foundation, a new way of being and habits that make their day-to-day life more better. And, the empire requires habits, routines that are, sourced from genuine feeling, yes, feel, but not from what you think you should feel, but from what you actually are feeling, and then putting these feelings into actions, not just processing the feelings, doing something with them. Faith is tested by time, so your belief in yourself will be tested by time and your day-to-day actions, not just by inspiration, processing the feelings, but by doing, building. This is why I'm calling this the trine that builds empires. The trine that builds the dreams that maybe you've been working on for 10 years, 20 years. You can use this energy to finally build your ideas, right? So the emotional truth can, survive contact with reality, not just contact with therapists, right? So again, pointing towards, putting our emotions, our inspiration, our ideas into practice, not just speaking them. Of course, nothing's the matter with speaking to them, to our friends, family, therapists and that, but, to actually do something, because Jupiter in Cancer can overdo. It can smother us instead of nurturing us, right? We can over-identify with our emotional experience, mistaking the processing, the thinking for building. And Saturn, it hardens in Pisces. It can harden into spiritual materialism, where we buy the spiritual clothes and, all the crystals and the tarot cards, but never actually use them, without doing the inner work with our inner child and the shadow work. We can fall into spiritual bypassing, where we don't actually do the things that we need to do to make our lives better. We can use discipline as a way of avoiding actual surrender, using it's not time yet, to refuse completing what's ready to end, right? And the trine, because it works unconsciously, builds emotional castles in the air, plans that look and sound good, but never actually come into material reality because you don't put actions towards them. So the trine, if we use this energy consciously, builds the foundations, the habits that carry the fire of July 2027, when Jupiter moves into Leo. And what you do with these 14 months determines which outcome you have, the castles in the sky, or solid plans, solid day-to-day habits, right? So we have a 3-chapter trilogy. As I said, the trine has its exact dates in August 2026, April 2027, and July 2027, with, both in water. Jupiter and Saturn are in Pisces and Cancer for 2 of these hits, and in fire once with Saturn in Aries and Jupiter in Leo in 2027 July. So the empire is built in feeling before it's seen in the world with the action of fire. And Jupiter, the planet of faith and expansion, as I said, trining Saturn, the planet of structure and time, are enemies in harmony over these 14 months, right? And what you build privately in water, while Jupiter and Saturn are in Pisces and Cancer, becomes public legacy when Saturn and Jupiter are in Aries and Leo, right? So this is 14 months of building that won't repeat for decades. And, empires aren't built in public. They're built in private, in feeling, in the visible work nobody applauds and nobody sees, right? So August 2026 through April 2027, with Jupiter in Cancer and Saturn in Pisces, both in water signs, both asking you to build something you cannot show anyone yet, your emotional foundations, to look at your psychological, spiritual and emotional health, right? To look at the shadows, the trauma, and to start or continue to heal that, building routines and structures that are sourced from genuine feeling, not just logic, faith tested by time, not just mood. The internal work most people skip because it doesn't look like progress. Then July 2027 arrives, as I said, and Jupiter moves into Leo and Saturn moves into Aries. Water becomes fire and everything you built in private becomes visible. This is the trine that builds empires, right? 3 exact hits across August 31st, 2026, April the 3rd, 2027, and finally the 12th of July, 2027. So chapter 1 is build a foundation in feeling. That's August, right? That's 2026. Chapter 2, April the 3rd, 2027. Chapter 2 is the foundation that gets tested. Our feelings and our emotions get tested. What cracks gets rebuilt on truth, not hope. And as we move into chapter 3 of this trilogy, right, what survived the water becomes your public legacy in fire, in action. So Jupiter is faith, expansion, abundance, the planet that says more is possible, believe. And as the world gets crazier and crazier by the day, it can be hard to have faith, to have hope. It's easy to believe in doom and gloom, right? So this energy uplifts us as a collective and as individuals over the next year. And Saturn is time, as I said, structure and discipline. It's the planet that says, did you actually do the work, right? And when they're fighting with each other, you get vision without bones or discipline without purpose. But when they're in trine, like they are now, 120 degrees of perfect harmony, growth, expansion can flow through structure, routine, good habits, instead of collapsing, being destroyed in it. And faith gets the bones, the legs to stand on. So, 14 months, 2 elements, fire and water, 3 chapters, and the private work of August 2026 becomes the public legacy of July 2027. So as this trine opens up right in August, start doing that scary shadow work, and it is scary to face our darkest trauma and pain, and to learn to live through it and with it, and to still hope when everything around us may be hopeless, right? But ultimately, this trine that wants to build your empire wants you to build something worthy of, your happiness, and you looking at it saying, yeah, I built that. So the only question is, is what are you going to build? So if you wanted the short version, that's it. But if you want to go into the different layers, the different chapters in more depth, what they mean, what exactly is Jupiter Trine Saturn, what the aspects actually mean, going from water to fire and all of that. And if you want zodiac guidance for your sun, moon and rising sign, then listen on. So the first hit is on the 31st of August 2026 at 11:16 p.m. and Jupiter's in the 19th 27 degree of Cancer, and Saturn is in the 1927 degrees of Pisces, which round up to the 20th Sabin degree, and I'll talk about Sabin degrees in part 2. So both of them are in water, both at the same degree, but 120 degrees apart, perfect trine, perfect harmony between the planet of expansion and the planet of structure. And as I said, this is the first of 3 as that passes over the next 14 months, and Jupiter, is the planet of faith, abundance, expansion, wisdom, meeting Saturn, the planet of time, limitation, karma, discipline, mastery, in the element of feeling, intuition, and emotional intelligence, right? So a water trine means that the structures, routines, habits you build will be sourced from feeling, not just logic. The faith you develop will require emotional truth, not just belief, right? And what lasts, which is represented by Saturn, must serve what nourishes you, which nurtures you, which makes you feel happy and emotionally, spiritually and psychologically stable, which is represented by Jupiter in Cancer. And what expands, what grows, represented by Jupiter's energy, must respect what time teaches, which is represented by Saturn, right? So it's not one moment, as I said, it happens in 3 chapters. So chapter 1, August the 31st, 2026 is the foundation. Jupiter's in Cancer, Saturn's in Pisces. Both are in Elisa, Jupiter in Cancer, right, and Ravati. Saturn in Pisces, right, and that's Sakras. So this is the embracing serpent meeting the final star, building the base, emotional intelligence is becoming a real structure routine. So we should be doing things to build our emotional and self-awareness, self-care, accepting our strengths and weaknesses, embracing our inner child as well as our shadow, those habits that may not be looked on favorably by ourselves and others, really get into the depths of our emotions, but in an intelligent way, by saying, yeah, I'm not perfect, but if I'm just aware of my emotions, the emotions of others, I can move forward in my life by doing A, B, C, D. And A, B, C, D, sort of like varies for everyone, right? But ultimately, chapter 1 is about processing emotions and thinking about what you want to build in your life over the next 14 months. Chapter 2, April the 3rd, 2027, is the deepening. Jupiter is in the 22nd degree of Cancer, Saturn's in the 22nd degree of Pisces, same that Sakras, as in both still in Elisa and Vavart in that Sakras, but just in higher Padas, and this means that the lessons are going to be deeper, and the foundation, the habits that we've built from August to April the 3rd, 2027 are going to be tested, so what you built in August 2026 either holds or it cracks. If it holds, it goes deeper. If it cracks, you rebuild in truth instead of hope. Chapter 3, which is the final chapter on the 12th of July, is the manifestation. Jupiter's in the 2nd degree of Leo, Saturn's in the 2nd degree of Aries, so the elements have changed, right? Water becomes fire, and Leo, Jupiter's in Leo's Magna Natsakra, which is the royal throne, and Saturn's in Aswini Natsakra, which is the divine horseman. And don't worry, I'm going to talk all about what the Natsakras mean and the deeper layers of those in part 2. But ultimately, as I said earlier, in chapter 3, what was private emotional work, water becomes public, visible, leadership, fire. And chapter 3, July the 12th, 2027, completes the trilogy. Ultimately, your empire should be built in feeling that now radiates into action. And 21 months from the entering orb of this trine, which was October 2025, to the leaving orb of July 2027, isn't an opportunity where we get lucky. This is you building something over 14 months that either lasts or it doesn't last, right? Saturn doesn't care about your vision, which is represented by Jupiter, right? Saturn asks, did you do the work, right? Jupiter doesn't care about your discipline, which is Saturn energy. Jupiter asks, does this serve life or just survival? And the trine, the 120 degree angle, means natural flow between them. It's easier than squares at opposition. It doesn't force crisis, but easier also means you can sleepwalk through this and build nothing, right? Or you can use this easiness to build something that actually lasts, right, and is worthy of keeping, right? And in the world that's losing hope, it's building that hope within yourself, but in a realistic way. Saturn's involved, so it allows us to turn our fantasies into reality, right? So August 2026 is chapter 1. So as I said, the only thing you have to ask yourself is, what are you going to build over the 14 months, right? So now I'm just going to talk a bit about the timeline and positions, right? So as I said, in 2025, Jupiter's trine to Saturn entered orb for the first time. It had no exact date in 2025. This was the setup, preparation, the hum underneath, before the full sound, which we're going to hear for the first time in August. And then on the 5th of December 2025, it left orb temporarily because of retrograde, right? And by the end of 2025, maybe if you look back, you felt something building. Maybe you did start to build something, new structures, new routines and habits, new year resolutions and all of that, right? On the 1st of January, so maybe you was thinking about what you wanted to do in the end of 2025 December, right? And maybe, habits you thought were solid revealed that they weren't that solid, right? Or maybe they revealed that they were actually rooted, and the faith you thought you had was tested for whether, these habits could hold weight, could hold the weight of the storm and, reality, right? And the trine entering the orb was the first whisper. As we go into chapter 1, it enters, Jupiter's trine to Saturn. Its exact orb, well, it's entering orb on August the 28th, 2026 at 4:44 a.m. And then it says that on August the 31st at 11:16 p.m. And Jupiter's in Cancer, Saturn's in Pisces, as I said, and Jupiter's in Elisa Pada 1, Mercury ruled Natsakra, and this brings poison or medicine, right? Kundalini, wisdom and protection. Saturn in Vavati Pada 1, the final star. Pusan is the deity, the nourisher, guide, the safe passage through transitions, through change and endings, right? And this energy leaves us on the 4th of September 2026 in terms of it being an exact orb, but it's still kind of like going to be influencing us, you know, well, it has been influencing us from 2025 really, but coming in and out of orb, but it's still going to influence us right up into its final exact time in July 2027, right? So, as I said, the element is water, emotional intelligence, intuition, compassion, feeling as knowing. The teaching is build a foundation in feeling, you know, so, you know, get comfortable, continue to be comfortable with your emotional world, your psychological, spiritual world, right? Asking yourself what routines serve your, you know, nourishment, your nurturing, your well-being, and which ones don't. What do you need to hold on to? What do you need to let go of? And what faith, you know, requires emotional truth? You know, what are you believing in which may not actually be, you know, something that you should believe in? You know, getting truthful about your day-to-day habits, your emotions, your psychological and spiritual health, your physical health, your financial health. And as we go into chapter 2, it enters orb on the 28th of March at 12:47 p.m. and is exact on the 3rd of April, and Jupiter's in the 22nd degree of Cancer and Saturn's in the 22nd degree of Pisces, rounded up to the 23rd Sabin degree, which I'll go into in more depth later. And Saturn and Jupiter are still in the same, and that's Sakra's, Elisa and Vavati, right? And the teaching here is, you know, more sophisticated, more nuanced. What we build in August either holds or reveals cracks, so it's asking us if the cracks appear, we build on the truth, right? Our emotional intelligence will get deeper as we go into April 2027, but we also will have our emotional health, you know, and awareness tested as well. And as we go into chapter 3, which enters on the 4th of July at 1:43 p.m. 2027, as that on the 12th of July at 12:15 a.m. 2027, and Jupiter and Saturn are in the 2nd degrees of Leo and Aries, and in Ashwini and Magna Pada 1, right? And this is fire, will, action, creativity, visibility, manifestation, leadership energy. So what was built in water, you know, the emotional foundation from August 2026 to April 2027, now becomes fire, visible action. So our private work, as I said, becomes public, and our emotional wisdom becomes creative leadership, and the trilogy completes itself, right? So ultimately, the water foundation is telling us to build from feeling. The water deepening in April 27 is testing what we build, right? And July 2027, the fire manifestation is asking us to make our actions visible, to go public, right? So the trilogy isn't 3 separate events. It's one teaching unfolding across 3 chapters, each building on the last, completing in fire what began in water, right? So now I'm just going to go deeper into the layers of what exactly is Jupiter Trine Saturn. So imagine 2 giant friends in the sky. Their names are Jupiter and Saturn. Jupiter is the biggest planet, huge, expansive, generous, full of abundance or gas, whichever you like to say, right? But yeah, Jupiter says yes, more, expand, grow, believe, have faith, Jupiter rules luck, wisdom, philosophy, optimism, the ability to see the bigger picture. Saturn is smaller but denser, serious, slow, patient, enduring. Saturn says, wait, build correctly, respect time, master the craft, discipline matters. Not everything that grows serves, so choose what you're growing, put your actions and attention to. Saturn rules limits, structure, routine, systems, authority, order, time, mastery through repetition, and the capacity to build things that last. Normally, these two argue. Jupiter wants to expand faster than Saturn thinks is wise, Saturn wants to limit more than Jupiter thinks is necessary, and Jupiter says, leap, go for it, and Saturn says, count the cost first, think about it, don't leap, and Jupiter says, have faith, it will work out, and Saturn says, faith without work is fantasy. But when they are 120 degrees apart in trine, something different happens. They're in perfect harmony, same element, natural flow. Jupiter expansion doesn't escape Saturn's structure, it flows through it. Saturn's limitation doesn't crush Jupiter's faith, it gives it bones to stand on. The two work together instead of fighting. What does 120 degrees mean? A circle is 360 degrees, right? So divide that by 3 and you get 120. 3 points, each 120 degrees apart, form a triangle. Trines are triangles, geometry of harmony. When two planets are 120 degrees apart, they can see each other perfectly, communicate easily, and support each other's work without friction. It's like two musicians who just click. One plays melody, Jupiter, one plays rhythm, Saturn. When they're in trine, the melody and rhythm don't fight, they enchant each other, the music flows. So why does element matter? Well, from August 2026 to April 2027, it's a water trine. Jupiter's in Cancer, Saturn's in Pisces, both in the elements of emotion, intuition, feeling and compassion. This means the harmony between expansion and structure happens in the realm, the area, the space of the invisible, the emotional, the felt, the feeling. In July 2027, it's a fire trine. Jupiter's in Leo, Saturn's in Aries, both in the elements of will, action, creativity and visibility. The harmony changes from the emotional realm space, to the action space. What was felt becomes manifested via actions, right? So why is this rare? Well, Jupiter takes 120 years to orbit the Sun, Saturn takes 29 years to orbit the Sun. They, conjunct, meet at exactly 0 degrees roughly every 20 years. These conjunctions are famous and we chat them as astrologers, right? These mark generational changes, great mutations. In 2020 we had COVID, right? That was the last conjunction of Saturn and Jupiter. The changing of the ages, typically when Jupiter and Saturn meet in conjunctions. But trines are less talked about but equally powerful, right? They happen between conjunctions, and this particular triple hit trine sequence across fire and water won't repeat in this exact configuration for decades. In the same that chakras and being in water, then moving to fire and all of that, and especially with Cancer and Leo involved, and we're alive for it. So what you do with it determines whether it works through you or passes by while you watch, right? So the planetary energies involved is Jupiter. This represents expansion, growth, faith, optimism, abundance, wisdom, philosophy, higher learning, travel, different cultures to your own, like foreign cultures, belief systems, compassion, generosity, luck, opportunity, and skill, the capacity to see possibilities others miss. Jupiter says more is possible. The universe is abundant. Believe. It rules Sagittarius and Pisces in traditional astrology. And this is really important because in the world now we're having AI, and it's like AI is going to take our children and our jobs and all of this. But Jupiter says, hey, look at how you could use AI to benefit humanity, to help your children, to help you, right? So it's about believing and having faith rather than falling into the doom and gloom. So Jupiter is also the guru, the teacher, the priest, the philosopher, the traveller, the one who grows, expands consciousness beyond current limits. The shadow of Jupiter is over expansion, growing without judgment and discernment, right? Faith as spiritual bypassing, saying things like, the universe will provide while you do nothing. You don't do no work, you don't do no shadow work, no inner work, nothing at all to bring your reality into reality, right? Hoarding abundance and wealth instead of saving it, and wisdom becoming dogma, tradition. Not all tradition is bad, but dogma is in, you must do it this way, there's no other way. Now AI is here, it's going to take over our jobs, we need to kill AI, rather than thinking, how can we bring AI into our day-to-day life in an ethical way, right? Generosity as ego performance is the shadow of, Jupiter. Luck assumed without gratitude, and optimism that's divorced from reality, right? Saying things like we all have the same hours in the day so everyone can be a millionaire, overlooking that, if you got people that can, do your housework, pick your kids up, look after your kids for you, have more free time than someone who don't have all those resources. So, being optimistic in a realistic way, looking not only at your own circumstances but everyone else's, right? Saturn represents structure, limitation, time, discipline, mastery, endurance, authority, responsibility, maturity, patience, perseverance, boundaries, consequences, karma, and the capacity to build things that actually last. So Saturn says, respect time, do the work, master the craft. Not everything works. Learn from what doesn't work. It rules Capricorn and Aquarius in traditional astrology. It's the taskmaster, the architect, right? The planner, the designer, the elder, the mountain, the one who tests whether your structure, your ambitions, your goals, your routines, your day-to-day habits can bear the weight of what you actually want to bring into the world, right? So the shadow of Saturn is structure as control, systems, limitation as punishment, time being weaponized, such as you're not ready yet, discipline becoming rigid, inflexible, perfectionism, authority as control and domination, right? Boundaries as wars, responsibility as burden, patience as passivity, and perseverance as stubbornness, and refusing to adapt, refusing to change, right? So when they work together, when they're trying, Jupiter's expansion gets Saturn's structure to hold it. Saturn's discipline is motivated by Jupiter's faith. Abundance, Jupiter becomes sustainable, long-term, Saturn energy, and structure, Saturn serves life, not just survival. Jupiter, faith, Jupiter respects time's teachings, Saturn's teachings, because Saturn rules time, right? And limitation, ruled by Saturn, enables us to focus on growth instead of scattered energy, just doing too many things at once. And what you build, Saturn expands beyond individual benefit into collective good, represented by Jupiter, and what you believe, Jupiter manifests through consistent practice over time. Saturn energy, right? And your vision, Jupiter has bones. Your discipline serves something meaningful. When they fight, like square or opposition, Saturn and Jupiter, growth fights limitation, faith confronts doubt, growth hits the ceiling, it stops. Structure, system, routines collapse under pressure to change. Time feels like an enemy of possibility. Discipline crushes joy. Optimism looks naive. Limits feel like prison. But when they're trying, they enchant each other, they grow. Jupiter makes Saturn's hard work feel meaningful. Saturn makes Jupiter's vision actually buildable. The flow is natural, which is gift and danger, because natural flow can breed complacency. You're just thinking, well, I'm going to always have enough time. I don't need to do the work the universe gives. I don't need to do anything. It's easy, so I'll do it later. Then later never comes, right? So, as I said earlier, this trine is happening, and it's up to you on what you build over the next 14 months, right? So now I'm just going to talk about the aspect in more detail, starting with the water trine energy. So Jupiter in Cancer is faith and feeling. Cancer is a cardinal water sign, not passive like Pisces and not fixed like Scorpio. Cardinal means initiating, beginning, moving. Water means emotional, intuitive feeling. Cancer initiates through feeling, the crab, hard cell, protecting the soft interior. The mother, the nourisher, the home, the womb, the roots, the source of safety, right? And Cancer rules in our human body, our chest, the breast, the stomach, the digestive system, also rules the home, our family, the mother, emotional security, nurturing, protection, and memory, our ancestry, our sense of belonging, our private self, our inner home, as well as our outer home, and what feeds you emotionally, spiritually, psychologically. In terms of the psychological theme of, Cancer energy, it's I feel, therefore I exist. Not the saying I think, therefore I am, but Cancer motivation is feeling, right? Feeling as primary knowing, emotional truth, proceeding, coming before intellectual understanding. The body remembers what the mind forgets. Home is not just a location, but the shadow of Cancer energy is smothering instead of nurturing, clinging instead of protecting, manipulation, feel guilt, emotional blackmail. I'm doing this for your own good, while serving your own need for control. Home as prison, family as obligation, not choice, nurturing that keeps you dependent. The gift of Cancer is nourishment that actually nourishes, protection that enables growth, not prevents it, emotional intelligence as power, not weakness, home as sanctuary strong enough to hold, transformation, family as chosen, not just inherited, memory honoured, without being imprisoned by the past. Jupiter in Cancer is growth through vulnerability. So from August 2026 to April 2027, it says your faith lives in your gut, not your head. Your abundance comes through nourishment, not accumulation, buying things, gathering things, people, experiences, but through nurturing, through slowing down, through looking after your inner and outer home. Your growth, your expansion requires emotional truth, not just positive thinking. The biggest growth edge isn't learning more, it's feeling more honestly. What grows when Jupiter is in Cancer is the ability to feel without defending, the ability to nourish self and others, emotional intelligence as a leadership skill, home as your sanctuary, that holds complexity, your family, chosen family or blood family as a source of abundance, right? Abundant source of nurturing experiences, right? And a gut knowing that you trust over external authority, working with your intuition, working with all barriers that stop you from trusting your intuition, right? And using vulnerability as strength, not weakness. But Jupiter, overdoes in Cancer, so you can over nurture, smother others, over feeling, drowning in emotion, over protection, preventing necessary risks and change, and over identifying with your family and home, which means you can't individuate, be an individual, over trusting your gut, when, you know, your gut is informed by trauma, not truth. This can, you know, not be good. So again, as I said earlier, you know, removing all barriers, working with your psychological, emotional, spiritual wounds, so you can trust your gut, because when, you know, when we're in that trauma response, our gut can tell us no when it's a yes, but it's built around fear and not understanding, right? And this is not to invalidate or to victim blame or anything, you know, seeking out the right tools, the therapist that's going to help you, you know, process your emotions, but also do the things and build the habits that's actually going to change your day-to-day life, right? So, you know, the trine between Saturn and Jupiter. Saturn is structure, discipline, limitation, helps. Saturn says your emotional truth is valid and you still need boundaries. Nurturing is a gift, and people still need to be responsible for themselves. Your home is a sanctuary and you can't control who stays or goes. Feel deeply and discern clearly, right? That's what it's telling you to do. Not to be ashamed of your emotions, not to hide them away, but to use good judgment and to build your inner trust. So Jupiter in Cancer is in Elisa Natsakra, and this covers the 19 and 22nd degrees of Cancer positions, right? So the ruling planet of this Natsakra, and remember, in August 2026, the 19th degree is where the trine starts. The 22nd comes from April 2027. The second is that hit, right? So as I said, the ruling planet is Mercury. The deity is Sarpa, the serpent, or specifically the Nagas, serpent deities, guardians of treasures and knowledge. The symbol is the coiled serpent, the serpent coiled around the wheel. The mythology is the Nagas, are serpent, you know, beings that live, that dwell in the underground spaces. The Patala, and, you know, guarding the treasures, the wisdom, and the underworld. They can poison or heal. Their bite kills, their venom can, you know, heal us, cure us. And the Kundalini, serpent coiled at the base of the spine, is Naga energy. And Elisa means the embracer or the entwiner. The serpent that coils around whole space, protects or suffocates, depending on wisdom that we apply, right, that we use. So, you know, the theme, the psychological theme, is holding on, clinging, coiling around what matters, protective instinct, becoming a possessive grip. The poison or medicine paradox is the same energy, heals or harms depending on consciousness. Kundalini as an evolutionary force or a destructive and disruptive obsession, you know, the knowledge that's hidden in the depths of us, deep down in, you know, the teachings of the earth and books and experiences, what we can get from our experiences when we think about them, the positives and the negatives, you know, whether, you know, what we hold onto in terms of experiences, relationships, protects us or suffocates us, right? And it's the knowledge that is hidden in the depths that's only accessible through descent, sometimes through going through depression, anxiety, and all of the, the hard experiences of life, like grief. So as I said, the poison or medicine paradox, same energy, heals or harms depending on our level of consciousness. Kundalini can be an evolutionary force that helps us grow, or a destructive obsession, right? The shadow of Elisa Natsakra is manipulation through emotional coiling, clinging, disguised as care, care and affection, right? Possessiveness as protection, using vulnerability to control, guilt as a weapon, the serpent that squeezes until you can't breathe, emotional blackmail, saying things such as I know what's best for you, smothering type of love. The gift of this energy is Elisa, protective embrace that holds without controlling, intuitive knowing from the depths, Kundalini wisdom rising naturally, healing through what was poisonous, alchemizing, changing trauma, right? Instead of allowing it to hold us back, using it to move us forward. That's what it wants us to do, right? Or, fiercely guarding what deserves protection, guarding with, in a fierce, courageous way, what we need to protect. Emotional intelligence, that sees beneath the surface, the serpent shedding skin as transformation are all gifts of this energy. So Jupiter and Elisa, August 2026 and April 2027, as part of this trine that builds empires, right, allows us to grow through the serpent's wisdom, have our faith that comes from the depths, not the heights, abundance that found what's found in what's hidden, guarded and protected, right? Growth that requires us to go down to, a descent into our own underworld, into our own trauma and feelings and all of that, right? Our psychological and emotional and spiritual pain, coiling around our own truth, shedding skins that no longer fit, thinking about what traumas we are actually overall, which ones affect us less. There will be some traumas that and wounds from, childhood experience, heartbreaks, or other experiences, grief, whatever, that, affect us more than some other experiences, right? So letting go of the relationships, the thought patterns, the behaviours that no longer fit what you want to do with your life. And Jupiter says expand. Elisa says first descend, go down. First embrace what you've been avoiding. First let the serpent teach you which knowledge is poison and which is medicine. The gift of this energy is faith becomes embodied, lived, right? Somatically sourced from Kundalini rising, not just from beliefs that you adopted, the beliefs that our parents, society, nations, the groups we belong to tell us to believe, but beliefs that we actually believe in through our own processing of what we think and feel, right? More feeling with this trine wants us to process our feelings and take action on them, reminding us that abundance comes through protecting what's sacred while releasing what's dead, what we need to let go of. And growth happens by going deeper into feeling, not escaping into philosophy. And the shadow of this energy is spiritual bypassing, that's dressed as serpent wisdom, using things such as my intuition says, to avoid accountability, coiling around people, projects, beliefs, and calling possession on being obsessive, protection, and expanding, growing through manipulation is not authentic growth. So, Elisa wants us to grow authentically, and Saturn in this trine provides the structure that prevents overcoiling, overstepping boundaries, right? Allowing, us to see that boundaries, we must have boundaries that say this far, no further than that. Time that teaches serpent wisdom can't be rushed, and Kundalini rises when the body's ready, not when the ego demands so, allowing us, wanting us to be patient with the process. This trine is lasting 14 months, right? So taking our time to build our empire. So Saturn's in Pisces, so this is structure in the formless. So Pisces is a mutable water sign, so it's not cardinal like Cancer, initiating feeling. It's not fixed like Scorpio, which is concentrated feeling, right? It's mutable, which means it's adapting. Flexible, it dissolves, it lets go, it transcends, it goes beyond, it sees the bigger picture often, both sides of any argument, all sides, many sides, which is why it's very important to have boundaries with Pisces energy, because sometimes seeing everyone's side can mean you forget your own side or you get confused, right? So it's emotional, intuitive, non-rational energy. It dissolves, let go through feeling. The symbology is the fish swimming in the oceanic consciousness, no boundaries, everything's connected to everything, right? Pisces rules the feet, the lymphatic system, the immune system, the pineal gland, the third eye, spirituality, mysticism, compassion, empathy, surrender, transcendence, going beyond, collective unconscious, dreams, intuition, art, music, film, substances, alcohol, drugs, medicines, hospitals, prisons, retreat, isolation, endings, dissolution, letting go. Psychologically, its theme is I transcend, therefore I am one with all. Separation is an illusion, there's no boundaries, right? It's a mystical consciousness, gives the ability to feel everyone's everything. It's a gift or a curse, depending on, your judgment, how you use this energy. The shadow of Pisces energy is escaping reality through substances, fantasy, spirituality, victim consciousness, martyrdom, codependency disguised as compassion. Your boundaries get so dissolved, you drown in everyone else's energy, saying things like I'm too spiritual for the material world, bypassing confusion as a permanent state, never being an individual because we are all one after all. This can lead to addiction and delusion, ignoring red flags, being taken advantage of, trying to escape via, drugs, alcohol and all of that. The gifts of Pisces energies, we can have universal compassion that includes boundaries, mystical awareness that's grounded in our body, a surrender that's active choice, not passive collapse, transcendence that doesn't escape incarnation, art as a prayer, empathy without enmeshment, the ability to hold the paradox, everything's connected, and still being responsible for your choices and having boundaries, right? So Saturn's in Pisces from August 2026 to April 2027, so the paradox is lived, right? Saturn is form, limitation, structure and boundaries. Pisces is formless, limitless, dissolution, boundaryless. So that's the paradox, right? So how do you structure the ocean? How do you discipline surrender? How do you limit the limitless? The answer is you don't limit Pisces transcendence, the ability to go beyond. You give it the bones to walk on. You don't force, structure, routine onto mysticism. You build structure from mysticism. Saturn in Pisces says your spiritual practice requires daily discipline, or it's just peak experiences that you can't sustain. Your compassion needs boundaries, or you burn out serving everyone. Your faith has to endure time's tests, or it's just a mood, So, looking at your own boundaries, if you serve everyone, if you really are living your life or living for other people's expectations, like really ask yourself, what do you really want from life, right? As your faith has to last time's tests, or it's just a mood if it doesn't survive the test, right? So when Saturn's in Pisces, what gets structured is your spiritual practice, wanting you to have a spiritual practice as a daily commitment, not an occasional retreat, but living it daily, having compassion with boundaries that prevent martyrdom, using art and creativity as a disciplined craft, not just inspiration when it strikes, using surrender as a conscious choice that you renew daily, faith tested by time, doubt, reality, what survives becomes real. Mysticism is integrated into material life, but Saturn, always hardens. In Pisces, spiritual materialism is treating, enlightenment as a achievement to master, using discipline to avoid actual surrender, boundaries becoming walls that prevent intimacy, structure that crush us being spontaneous, and time weaponized against trust. Thinking things like you're not evolved enough yet, so you're not ready. And of course this trine wants you to take action, right, on your ideas, on your feelings. And also watch out for skepticism killing genuine spirituality and mysticism, right? And Saturn's trine with Jupiter, the planet of expansion, faith and abundance, helps us, right? Jupiter says your discipline serves life, not just control. Your structure enables flow, it doesn't prevent it. Your boundaries protect what's sacred, and don't wall off the connection. Practice daily and trust divine timing. Master the craft and stay open to the mystery. And Revati, Natsakra, the final star. Revati covers the 16.40 degrees of Pisces to the 30th degree of Pisces, covering Saturn in Pisces in the 19th degree, which is August 2026, and then the second is that trine when Saturn's in the 22nd degree of Pisces in April 2027. Mercury rules and this Natsakra, the deities Pulsan, the nurturer, the protector of travellers, the guide of souls, the one who ensures safe passage. The symbol is the fist, the drum, marking rhythm for the journey, or a pair of fish swimming in opposite directions. The mythology is Pusan is a Vedic deity of journeys, roads, pathways and transitions. He guides souls from this life to the next, protects travellers on dangerous roads, nourishes those in need and ensures that the herds don't get lost. He's the one who says you're safe, I'm guiding you, trust the path, even when you can't see the destination. Revati is the 27th and final Natsakra, the completion, the end of the cycle before it begins again at Aswini. Psychologically, this is about completion, endings, finishing, transition, change, safe passage through endings, the guide who doesn't abandon you in the sort of luminal in between space between what was and what's becoming. It gives us nourishment during the transformation, during our testing times, our changing times, and it's wealth that comes through service, the final star before dawn. The shadow of this energy is Revati, the inability to complete, always starting new things before finishing the current, resisting endings, trying to prolong what's already over, depending on guides, teachers instead of walking your own path, nourishment that enables dependence. Just one more, sort of like journey, just do this one thing, then I can settle, I can rest, avoiding settling and endings, right? Always doing more to avoid just being still. Accumulation, buying things, cars, watches, clothes, jewelry, whatever, as security against an uncertain future. The gift of Revati energy is that we honour our endings as sacred as beginnings, starting new things. We honour the ending, we make room for them, we let them happen, and we also give ourselves and others a safe kind of passage, space for change and transformation and transitions. We allow ourselves to be nurtured by ourselves and others freely. We allow ourselves to be independent and to be guided in a way that sort of like builds our independence, shows independence, gives others independence. We build our wealth through genuine service. The wisdom of the final star is, I have been through the whole cycle. I can help you deal with your issues, right? So when Saturn's in Revati Natsakra, August 26, April 2027, structure in the space of completion and transition, discipline of the guide who has walked the path. So this is sort of like time-honored endings instead of rushing to the next beginning. Boundaries that create safe passage, not wars that prevent movement. Saturn says build structure that endures, that lasts. Bhavati says and that structure must enable completion, transition, the endings that are sacred, the journeys that can't be rushed. Together, structures, routines, habits that don't just sustain growth but also hold endings, completion. Disciplines that include rest, endings, and, time, especially unused time, mastery that knows when to release, mastery and trust the guide and to trust the intuition, making the best use of your time, right? Planning. The gift of Saturn is that its discipline creates safe spaces for Pisces dissolution, allowing us to let go in a safe way, right? And the nourishment and nurturing Ravati is given structure by Saturn, so it actually feeds rather than just flows past, it uses. And this trine wants us to use that energy, right? And Saturn and its time represents endings and transitions rather than treating them as failures, and keeps building. The shadow is using it's not time yet, Saturn's energy, right, to avoid completing what's ready to end. Bhavati's energy, structuring the journey so tightly, so rigidly, there's no space for the mastery or the mystery. And mastery becoming a guru complex, like I'll guide you as a power grab instead of a genuine giving service, right? And Jupiter in this trine provides the faith that completion, that endings are okay and that endings are not failures, right? They allow us to let go of what didn't work or just to end things, to move on to new things and to accept new things into our heart and life, right? And abundance consciousness trusts that the next cycle will provide what we need, and expansion includes changes, not just achievements but the endings as well. And when Jupiter's in Cancer, trine Saturn in Pisces, we allow ourselves to become more emotionally intelligent in a way that's more structured and real. Not that I feel therefore I'm right, but I feel. I test the feeling against time and consequence. I build on what's true, right? Not spiritual practice when I'm inspired, but daily discipline source from genuine faith. Not boundaries prevent love, but boundaries enable sustainable love. The water element means this happens in the invisible realm first. Feelings, intuitions, emotional truths, spiritual knowings. You can't see the structure being built the way you see a house going up. It's internal, psychological, somatic. It's, within our soul. And the trine says, it's real. Emotional structures, routines, habits are real structures, routine and habits, right? The ability to feel without defending, that's mastery. The discipline of compassion, that's strength. Faith is tested by time, that's wisdom. So what this looks like in practice, you feel called to build something, which is Jupiter's expansion, instead of immediately quitting your job, announcing the big vision, expecting the universe to provide, which is the shadow of Jupiter. You start small, test the calling against time. You build a foundation, the daily habits, right? You look after your psychological, emotional and spiritual, physical and financial health, right? While maintaining a stable core. You let the vision prove itself through practice, not just belief, which is Saturn's discipline in play, right? Your spiritual practice deepens instead of, chasing peak experiences, treating meditation as achievement, spiritual materialism, which is Jupiter-Saturn. You commit to daily practices regardless of the results. Build structure that sustains through dry periods. Let time teach what inspiration can't. That's Saturn's endurance, right? You recognize a relationship, a job, a pattern is ending. That Saturn in reverse is completion, right? Instead of clinging past its time, guilt tripping others to stay, resisting natural endings and completions, at least shows, shadow coiling, you honour the ending, creating safe passage through endings and transition for all involved, and you trust that completion creates a space for what's next, and you have faith, right, in the endings that will bring new beginnings. So to integrate the water trine energy of August 2026 and April 2027, which teaches emotional truth is valid, but we need to test this, and that feelings matter, and they are not always accurate, but they still matter. Intuition is a gift and can be informed by trauma, not truth. Compassion serves and requires boundaries. Spirituality heals and can become bypassing, like, oh, I can't do this because, the universe gives, I don't need to work on all of that. And that sometimes our intuition can be wrong, especially when we don't heal or know what's a trauma response and what's intuition, and training ourselves to tell the difference, right? And, believing that structure, routine matters and must serve life, not just order. We have to build structures and day-to-day habits that we want, and I know sometimes we can't because we've got to go to work and all of that, but within that we can still have some power in doing things in the ways that we can do them. You may have to work at a job you don't like, but in your mind you can be free while you're doing that job, right? So Jupiter says expand, have faith, believe in abundance, feel deeply. Saturn says, you also need discipline, to discipline that faith, to test that feeling, to build a structure, a routine, so that your growth lasts. The trine makes both work together without the friction of a square opposition. The flow is natural between Jupiter and Saturn, right, over the next 14 months, which is the gift. It allows us to build things easily, but the danger is it's easy to miss the opportunity to build, to think it's flowing so I don't need to do the work, right? Most people, as I said in the introduction, we feel the water trine as I'm emotional right now, so I must be processing something, but few of them will use it as a conscious opportunity to take positive action to build lasting, routines and habits that are sourced from genuine emotional truth and understanding, and emotional and spiritual and psychological truth and understanding. So your choice determines which one you are. Are you the one that's just going to process it, say, oh, I'm just processing feelings? Or are you going to take actions on those feelings and work through the things that you need to work through so you can build your empire that will last, right? And as we go into the final chapter of this trine, the fire change, the fire shift into Leo and Aries, right? In April, the water trine is orb in 2027, 3 months pass, and then July 2027, Jupiter's in Leo and Saturn is in Aries. So water becomes fire, private emotional work becomes a publicly visible act, what was built in feeling becomes manifest in will. This isn't, a separate transit, it's a chapter 3 of the trilogy, the final chapter, the completion that makes sense of what came before, right? So Jupiter in Leo creates self-unity, personal freedom, us taking personal responsibility and accountability for our life. Leo is the fixed fire energy, not cardinal like Aries, which is initiating will, not mutable like Sagittarius, which is adapting philosophy. Fixed means sustaining, maintaining, enduring, long-lasting, right? So fire means action, will, creativity, visibility. Leo sustains creative will. The lion, regal, confident, radiant, solar. Leo rules heart, solar plexus, spine, circulation, creativity, self-expression, leadership, play, joy, children, romance, performance, art, creativity, right? entertainment, fame, recognition, generosity, fairness, confidence, dignity, and the sovereign self, the independent self, right? So the psychological theme of this is I create, therefore I exist. Self-expression is a necessity, you need it, and it's not a luxury, right? Creativity is an identity, the need to be seen, the need to be recognized, celebrated, not from ego at the highest expression of this energy, right? But from a genuine solar nature, you know, the sun rules Leo, right? But the shadow is ruling through ego, of course, but the non-shadow of Leo is being, you know, I'm accountable for myself, I am sovereign over myself, I am captain of my own ship, you know, the main character in my story, and other people can be main character in theirs, right? The sun doesn't dim its light because someone may be intimidated, neither does healthy Leo. Shadow Leo, ego inflation, narcissism, needing constant validation, applause, creativity as performance for approval rather than authentic expression, leadership as domination, generosity as manipulation, such as, you know, look how I'm giving a lot, look how giving I am, look how much I do for others, all of that. Playing small to avoid threatening others, or playing big to compensate for inner emptiness. Pride preventing growth, inability to receive, you know, only give. So the gift of Leo is radiant, authentic self-expression, creativity sourced from genuine joy, not from, you know, external validation, leadership that elevates others, you know, lifts others up, generosity without expecting anything in return, confidence that's grounded in self-knowledge, not comparison, the capacity to play seriously and work playfully, solar warmth that nourishes everyone nearby. So Jupiter in Leo is expansion through authentic expression, and Jupiter in Leo at the final leg of this trine that builds empires, right, in July 2027 says your growth now requires visibility. What you built privately in water, August 2026, all the way up until July needs public expression, not performance, expression. There's a difference. Performance is doing for external validation, needing applause to feel valuable, right? Creating what you think people want instead of what wants to be born through you. Expression is creating from overflow, sharing because it's bursting out of you, leading because the vision demands it, being visible because hiding serves nothing. What expands when Jupiter is in Leo? Authentic creative output, leadership sourced from genuine vision, the ability to be seen without performing, joy as a spiritual practice, heart opening beyond personal relationships into collective service, confidence rooted in self-knowledge, generosity that doesn't deplete but Jupiter can overdo, right? But in Leo, it can make us, you know, overconfident, arrogant, over-visible, fame-seeking as a substitute for genuine recognition, over-giving, generosity as ego performance, over-creating, quantity over quality, over-leading, dominating others rather than aspiring, overplaying, avoiding serious work through perpetual, everlasting, constant fun without the work. The trine with Saturn between Jupiter and Saturn, right, which is the planet of discipline, structure and limitation in Aries, is initiation and action helps. Saturn says your creativity requires craft, hard work, you building your skill ship, right? Your leadership requires competence, expertise, hard work, learning what you know, right? Your visibility requires genuine substance created from, you know, overflow from a need from within you and developed through skill and practice rather than just doing what's trending on social media, right? It's asking you to lead boldly and to serve the collective, be seen and earn the recognition through actual work, right? And Magna Nat Sacra, the royal throne, where Leo, Saturn in Jupiter in Leo is, right, covers the 0 degrees to the 13.20 degrees of Leo, which covers the 2nd degree of Jupiter, where, Jupiter is when it makes the final exact on the 12th of July 2027. So the ruling planet of Magna is Ketu, which is the south node, which rules past life karma, the way we end things, release things, spirituality, detachment. The deity is Pistris, the ancestors, the departed fathers who watch over lineage, the blessed descendants that demand honour. The symbol is the royal throne, the palanquin, the carriage seat of royalty, or the chamber, the inner room, your inner self. As I said, this energy, whilst it's in Cancer, right? So, August 2026, April 2027 wants us to deal with our inner world, our feelings and our emotions, right? So, in terms of the mythology, Pistris are ancestors who left a physical form but remain involved in family lineage, blessing those who honour them, withdrawing favour from those who forget. Magha means the mighty or the great. This is regal energy, inherited power, ancestral blessing. The throne you sit on because those before you built the kingdom, but that throne comes with responsibility. Honour the lineage, serve the people, use power wisely, or your ancestors withdraw their support. So in terms of the psychological theme, this is inherited power, ancestral legacy, regal bearing, the weight of responsibility that comes with authority, creative, sort of sovereignty as birthright, not achievement, leadership emerging from lineage, your literal family or spiritual creative lineage, as in your chosen tribe, or just from the collective, right? Honouring what came before while building what's next. The shadow of this energy is entitled arrogance, right? I'm special because of my lineage, my family, my bloodline, using ancestors as an excuse for privilege, power without responsibility, regal energy as domination, not service, creative output as proof of superiority, leadership that demands, you to serve others, forgetting the throne was built by others' labour. The gift of this energy is genuine sovereignty, sourced from honouring lineage, creative power that acknowledges what came before, leadership as service to the collective, not self, using inherited gifts to benefit many, regal dignity without arrogance, the throne that held lightly, you hold on to it lightly with gratitude and responsibility, without the arrogance, without saying it's mine and no one else can have it, whilst, keeping it as yours, but, allowing others the same, ability to, hold their own energy and throne as well. So Jupiter in Magha Natsakra July 2027 wants us to grow through honouring our lineage, our bloodlines, our family heritage and traditions, while creating a new legacy, having faith that your creative work matters because your ancestors paved the way, and have abundance, recognising that you didn't earn this alone. You're building on foundations that others created, right? And Jupiter says expand your creative freedom, sovereignty, grow it, step into your own power. And Magha says, and remember this freedom is inherited, blessed by ancestors, come with responsibility. It comes with responsibility to your lineage, to your family, to your bloodline and the collective. It isn't just about you. The gift of this energy is that creative work happens that honours traditions while innovating beyond it. Leadership that soars from knowing that those who led before you walked that path, and visibility that chooses to uplift, not just an individual brand, but it's used to uplift others literally or spiritually or creatively. The shadow of this energy is using, the line of my ancestors were special to justify your entitlement, creative arrogance, using leadership as ego, performance, growing without gratitude for what enabled the growth. Saturn in this trine provides the discipline that honors the craft, the skills learned from your ancestors, and gives you the structure, the ability to create habits or carry on habits that preserve what deserves preserving, what deserves to last, while releasing what's obsolete, what needs to end. And it allows you to remember that you're one link in a long chain and to act accordingly, and gives you perspective on the timeline and doing things in the timeline and meeting deadlines. So Saturn in Aries at the time of this final time of Saturn and Jupiter meeting in the trine, right, that lasts 40 months. So Saturn in Aries, July the 12th, 2027. Aries is a cardinal fire. It's not fixed like Leo, not mutable like Sagittarius. Cardinal means initiating, beginning, starting, pioneering, being the first, right? Fire means will, action, desire, assertion. Aries initiates through will. The ram charging forward, head first, direct, fearless. Aries rules head, face, and adrenals. Initiation, independence, courage, action, directness, honesty, sometimes brutal honesty, speed, impulsivity, raw desire, the capacity to begin without knowing how it ends. The psychological theme is I am, therefore I act, self-assertion as the primary force, the individual before the collective, the pioneer who goes first without a guarantee of survival, initiation as necessity, if no one starts, nothing happens. The shadow of Aries energy is reckless impulsivity, acting, saying things without thinking, aggression disguised as honesty, selfishness justified as independence, competition as war, leadership as domination, and control, beginning things without finishing, charging ahead without considering others, brutality rationalized as directness, anger unexamined right. The gift of Aries is courageous initiation that opens paths for others, healthy self-assertion that models sovereignty, freedom, independence that doesn't isolate, competition that elevates, lifts up everyone, leadership through pioneering action, honesty that doesn't weaponize, the capacity, the ability to begin even when you're scared and terrified, right? So Saturn in Aries is the mastery of self-assertion. With Saturn in Aries, in July 2027, finishing this trine is another paradox, right? Saturn is a slow, cautious, testing sign. Aries is fast, impulsive, and charging, starting. Saturn says, wait, consider the test. Aries says, go now, do it now, you should have did it yesterday. How do they work together? Well, the answer is discipline initiation, discipline starting things, right? Structured pioneering, mastery of will, not will suppressed, hidden. Saturn crushing Aries, but will trained, Saturn refining Aries, Saturn directing Aries, and this trine allows us to do this as it, asks us to, show the thing publicly that we've been building over the 14 months, right? So it's the warrior who's mastered the weapon, the martial arts student who is now the teacher, the pioneer who counted the cost before departing, but departed anyway, starting things, being brave, feeling the fear and doing it anyway. And what gets structured when Saturn's in Aries? Well, it allows us to refine our will through discipline, assertion that's honest without being brutal, independence balanced with responsibility, initiation that actually, completes and ends, starting with the end in mind as well, leadership through competence, not just charisma, anger channeled into action, not destruction, self-mastery as a foundation for collective service. But Saturn hardens in Aries. You will get suppressed until, it explodes. Assertion, goes timid. You're timid, you don't do anything, then you go into aggressive action, no middle ground. Independence, becoming isolation. Initiation, paralyzed by fear of failure. Leadership as, inflexible, rigid authority. Anger, turn inward as depression, or outward as violent, self-mastery as self-punishment. The trine with Jupiter, which is expansion, faith, abundance in Leo, creative expression, helps Jupiter. And Jupiter, says your discipline will serve creative growth. Your structured action enables joy. Your mastery of self creates space for play, and it asserts boldly and celebrates freely. So it tells you to start things courageously and to trust abundance will meet you. In terms of the Aswini Naksatra, where, Saturn is in the second degree right of Aries at this time. Aswini rules the 0 to the 13.20 degrees of Aries. The ruling planet is Ketu, the south node. Both Makha and Aswini Naksatra are ruled by Ketu. Past life themes are strong in July 2027. The deity is Aswini Kumaris, the divine twin horsemen, celestial physicians, bringers of dawn, masters of swift action and healing. The symbol is the horse's head, or two horses pulling a chariot. The mythology is Aswini Kumaris are twin sons of the sun and the celestial mare horse, right? They're physicians to the gods, healers who move at, supernatural speed, and the bringers of miracles and the masters of quick, swift action. So, they rescued the sage Chavana from old age, these twins, and restored youth to the aged and healed the unhealable, right? So they also travel in a golden chariot pulled by horses, arriving at dawn with cures, answers and initiations. So it's, reminding us, like, as we go through these 40 months to, restore the youth back to ourselves via hope. As I said at the introduction, right, it's hard to have hope in this world when we, so much news headlines tell us to fear. So, it wants us to take quick, swift healing action, provides us with, miraculous interventions. So, it's showing that we can get help from places that we never knew that were going to help us, or, things can come unexpectedly, whether through physical help or dreams, revealing ways to us, or visions and stuff like that. It can give us pioneering healing medicine methods, the ability to move fast without recklessness, initiation that transforms healing through speed, not a slow process, a dawn consciousness, the first light after darkness, the divine twins working together, so the integration of opposites. The shadow of Aswini is speed as escape from death, initiating without integration, healing as a fix without transformation, miraculous thinking, avoiding practical work, pioneering, starting things that abandoned what started, swift action as impulsivity, healing others while neglecting the self. The gift of Aswini energy is healing that actually heals, pioneering methods that serve the collective, initiation honoured as sacred, speed combined with precision, action sourced from divine guidance, not just ego will, the capacity to move fast when needed and slow when appropriate, dawn after a long night, right? So Saturn in Aswini in July 2027 allows us to have routines and structure in the space of swift, quick action, action, discipline of the divine healers, time, mastering speed, not making it slow but making it precise, boundaries around pioneering energy so it completes what it starts, right? And Saturn says build structures, routine, habits that endure through time, as Sweeney says, and sometimes enduring, long-lasting routines and goals and habits require quick action, decisive initiation, healing that can't wait for perfect timing. Together, discipline, pioneering, structured speed and mastery of initiation. So the gift of this energy is that Saturn's discipline prevents Sweeney's impulsivity while honouring Sweeney's need for quick action. The healing is given structure, so it integrates instead of just fixing the symptoms. It actually gets to the root causes of why the symptoms are there in the first place and fixes those. And time serves the dawn. Darkness doesn't last forever, but light requires penetration and penetration, right, and openness, and the willingness to work through our psychological, emotional, spiritual wounds and build the empire, the daily habit, the life that you want to build, right? And structure prevents the swift action that's needed, and mastery becomes perfectionism that never acts. And Jupiter in this trine provides the faith that swift action can succeed, right? And abundantly trusting that we can start new things and be pioneers, and we can do as much as any other human within, of course, our realm of expertise, or not thinking I want to be the next Elon Musk or anything like that, but thinking about things that you can do within your capabilities. And that's not saying there's someone out there who could be the next Elon Musk if that's what you really want to do, but this is all about building your empire, not the empires the world is telling you to build, right? So figuring out your path and building your empire, right? And it wants you to expand, to grow, celebrating the healing instead of criticizing the speed, right? So ultimately, we start off in August 2026 with the water trine, and then this trine happens in water in April 2027, and then it goes into the fire trine in July 2027. So water wisdom becoming visible action through fire, right? So when Jupiter in Leo trine Saturn in Aries, right, you get what was built privately and becoming a public offering, right? The emotional foundation of the Cancer Pisces water trine becomes the creative manifestation of the Leo Aries fire trine. The structures, routines, habits built in feeling become visible in action. The faith tested in the invisible space and realm becomes leadership in the visible space and realm, right? So this is the trilogy's completion. August 2026 is, building the foundation and feeling. Jupiter, Cancer, Saturn, Pisces. April 2027 is the test and deepening the foundations, the same signs but the higher degrees, revisiting our emotions, our feelings, and starting to put into action the parts of the empire that we want to build. July 2027 is the manifest foundation as a visible action. Jupiter, Leo, Saturn, Aries. You can't skip water and go straight to fire. The manifestation, Leo, Aries, only works if sourced from a genuine emotional truth, which is Cancer, Pisces. If you don't build a real foundation, between August 2026 and July 2027, by the time we get to the fire trine in 2027, it will be empty performance, ego, growth only, visibility without substance. But if you did the water work, you felt your feelings honestly, built boundaries sourced from compassion, disciplined your faith, structured your spirituality, honored completions, then July 2027's fire trine is the private work going public, the emotional wisdom becoming a creative leadership, the invisible structure manifesting as a visible impact, right? So what does this look like in practice? Well, the business you started building in private August 2026, maybe journaling, testing ideas, developing skills, building relationships, goes public in, July 2027. Not because you forced it, because it's ready. The foundation holds your launch, it's ready. The creative project is, giving birth invisibly from August 2026 and April 2027. This is when it deepens. Maybe you're going to write that book, develop that practice, start that YouTube channel, start that podcast, start that business, refining, your experiences, reflecting on your psychological, emotional, spiritual wounds, becoming more emotionally, spiritually and psychologically stable, refining any teachings you have been, trying to practice throughout your life, whatever it is, you will be ready to share it if you wish in July 2027. It's not just about sharing it publicly. It can be working on your own identity, your self-expression, and then, showing that publicly in 2027. We've all have got different goals and different sort of empires, things we want to build, right, during this 14-month period. And as I said, when you show out in public, it's not because you're seeking validation, it's because whatever it is complete enough to offer. The work serves, right? The self-expression serves, the leadership capacity you've been developing emotionally. Now you actually lead, not because you're arrogant, because the vision requires it, and you would have built competence to hold the role. The throne you sit on was built by water wisdom. You occupy it with the will, right? So to integrate all of this, the fire trine of July 2027 completes what the water trine started in August 2026. Your private becomes public, the invisible becomes visible, emotions become creative, compassion becomes leadership, structure is tested, your routine, your habits is tested in feeling, and this becomes structured, invisible action. Jupiter says expand, grow into expression, have faith in visibility, create abundantly, lead generously. Saturn says, and also you've earned this through water work. The foundation holds because you built it correctly. The visibility serves because the structure was genuine, right? The trine makes both work together. The trilogy, feel it, August 2026, test it, April 2027, manifest it, July 2027, one teaching, 3 chapters, water to fire, private to public, invisible to visible. Most people will experience July 2027 as I feel creative, confident. Suddenly, without recognizing, it's been a sort of like fruiting, planting, seeding stage, fruiting from the seeds planted in water or the soil, and Fu would have consciously used the water trine energy, from August to April 2027 to build a foundation that makes the fire trine in July 2027 actually powerful rather than performative, and the choice determines which you are, whether you're going to do the work or just let it flow, let it trine, right? So now I'm going to finish up this part with zodiac guidance for all sun, moon and rising signs. Then when we go into part 2, I'm going to go deeper into the sabin symbols, then that sacral wisdom, and also part 2 of all my specials are all directed with you. So I've given you all this astrological info. How are you going to use it? How are you going to build your empire? So in the second part, I'm going to talk about the sabin symbols and that sacral wisdom in more depth, but I'm also going to tell you how to practically develop the areas of your life, whether it be your sort of like spiritual area of your life, your educational areas, right? How to work with this energy in your relationships, giving you actionable guidance by giving you 6 practices that will help you use this energy, how to look after your health and body during this time, and giving you some reflection prompts to help you integrate this water fire trine, right? So now I'm I'm going to finish up this first part, right, with the zodiac guidance for 12 sun, moon and rising signs, and in part 2 we're going to get physical, no practical. So yeah, stick with me guys, and thanks for listening. Okay, so for Aries, sun, moon and rising, the water trine in August 2026 and April 2027 activates your 4th house of home, emotional foundation, ancestry and your private self through Jupiter in Cancer, and your 12th house of spirituality, endings, the unconscious, addictions and surrender through Saturn being in Pisces, right? So these 2 houses speak to your innermost world, what you hide deep inside, what holds you, what you're ready to release. The 4th is the ground beneath your feet. The 12th is the dissolution before rebirth. And when the fire trine arrives in July 2027, the axis, safe changes. Jupiter moves to your 5th house of creative expression, children, joy, romance, and Saturn lands in your 1st house of identity, body, self-presentation, and your private foundation becomes your public self. So how this impacts you, Aries, energy, life for action, ready to go, go, go. Your sign wants to charge forward, initiate, starting things and moving, and the water trine is asking you to stop, to go inward and to build something you cannot show anyone yet. And this may be hard for you with Jupiter expanding your 4th house, and this brings home, family and emotional safety to your awareness. But Cancer doesn't operate at your preferred speed. It wants you to slow down, go in your feelings, think before you act and react, with Mars being natural ruler, controlling your drives, motivation drives, sex drives, all of that. You're ready to go, as I said. So you can feel the slowing down as something, making you a bit frustrated, and, but it can also bring you an unfamiliar peace if you lean into slowing down. And Saturn in your 12th house is the harder, energy. It's demanding surrender for you to get discipline, for you to think, for you to plan. It wants you to, end the things that you have been outrunning, putting off, ending, leaning into spiritual practice with no performance value, doing it for your psychological, emotional and spiritual well-being. And it wants you to take rest that doesn't look like productivity, so it's, you may meditate while still working. It's asking you to just meditate now. The somatic signature for Aries, in terms of where you feel it in your body, is in your jaw, tension there, and maybe adrenal spikes. When stillness is required, you may get the jitters, be restless, finding it hard to stay still because your nervous system reads emotional processing as passivity and triggers a sense of urgency to act rather than feel, and the invitation is to stay. And your ancestral patterns, 4th house energy, can come up, but not as a crisis, but as a quiet recognition, such as, this is where I learned to be unsafe, or learn to feel unsafe. This is what makes me feel unsafe. And it wants you to lean into healing anything that needs healing at the base level, at the core, going into your feelings, which you may not want to do. But if you do this, you spend this time on your emotionals, any plan, building your emotional awareness and intelligence, any plans that you put off but then pick up again, will benefit from it, right? So the shadow to this energy is building emotional appearance, talking about feelings, going to therapy, posting about healing without doing the actual 4th house inner work, right? Going deep within yourself and healing anything that needs to be healing. And you will know the difference because, one will feel like movement if you just, posting on social media talking about things but not actually sitting with them, processing them. It'll feel like movement. You're still doing what you normally do, with speed, but if you take time out to slow down, you will feel more rooted within yourself and more sure and confident about your plans, because you would have actually dealt with the emotions, so the emotions won't come out so impulsively as normal, right? So the fire trine in July 2027 is the gift you have actually earned. So if you do what the water trine tells you to do, which is go within your feelings, when Jupiter's in your 5th house, when Jupiter's in Leo, this brings creativity, joy, romantic aliveness, self-expression from genuine depth and being open. And Saturn will be in your 1st house in July 2027, and it gives you, the energy, the spine, the backbone, the leadership to hold space, and your independence won't be performed, it will be built for you because you took time out, right? And you realise that your identity no longer requires constant action to feel real. So in terms of actionable guidance for you guys, Aries, practice 1 between August 2026 and April 2027. Spend 1 hour weekly in your home with no agenda, no phone, no tasks. Notice what feelings come up in stillness, and these are your 4th house teachers, the feelings, working through them, write them down, explore why they come up, what needs to be healed, what's behind the symptoms of these feelings, right? The second practice is identify one thing in your 12th house. So the 12th house, metaphorically, but in actuality governs our addictions, our overthinking, our hidden enemies, secrets and lies we tell to others and ourselves, typically because it's hard to face our truth, right? So for some of you, maybe an old grief, heartbreak, a spiritual practice you abandon, a pattern that needs to end, or a relationship that that needs to end but you put it off, and giving it structured attention monthly, making a plan on how you can overcome, let go of the things that need to be let go of, work through any addictions and all of that. And remember that Saturn will reward your consistency, not your intensity. So it's not about going hard for 1 month, dealing with these feelings and then forgetting about it for the 14 months this trine is active. No, it's about taking slow and steady steps, month in, month out, over the 14 months to look at one thing in your 12th house that needs healing. In terms of red flags, watch out for you using busyness to avoid what the 4th house is bringing up, confusing, exhaustion with spiritual surrender, skipping the emotional foundation to force creative expression before July. In terms of green lights, when you're working with this energy, right, you feel genuinely at home in your own body, you access creativity in July 2027 that surprises you with its depth because it came from somewhere real. So yeah, that's the end of the guidance for Aries, Sun, Moon and Rising. For Taurus, Sun, Moon and Rising, the water trine places Jupiter in your 3rd house of communication, siblings, local community, the thinking mind, short travel, and Saturn in your 11th house of collective vision, friendships, social networks and long-term hope. So this pairing asks, can you your voice serve something larger than your immediate circle? So for some of you, you'll be looking to join new social groups or new spiritual groups, religious groups, intellectual groups or any other group. The 3rd house is how you speak and think, and the 11th house is what you are speaking and thinking. What it builds, what you're speaking and thinking builds over time. And when the fire trine arrives in July 2027, Jupiter moves into your 4th house of roots, emotional foundation, and Saturn enters your 12th house of endings and spiritual practice, the unconscious, addiction, and the energy, the expansion moves into your inner world, inwardly, just as the structure asks you to release the things that need releasing. So Taurus, you're built for endurance, things that are long lasting, not speed, you can be slow, you're very good at slow and steady work. You understand Saturn energy because it's an earth sign while it rules Capricorn and Aries, but Saturn instinctively, because it's about building slowly, accumulating carefully, building up resources, money, material wealth, carefully maintaining what you've grown. So it's not about, getting, it's about keeping what you have as well. And what this trilogy, this trine over the 14 months is that you use your voice. The third house Jupiter pushes growth into communication, writing, teaching, speaking, learning, and your local connections. So you may find yourself socializing more with neighbors, stuff like that as well. Not performing expertise, knowing it all, but genuinely sharing what you do actually know, what you have learned through your experiences, right? And Saturn in your 11th house of structures, routine, habits, bringing that to the collective dimension of groups, right? This isn't talking to one person, it's contribution and contributing, right, to a vision that outlives the conversation. And the somatic signature for Taurus rising is the throat and neck, right? So you feel things deeply and process slowly, as I said, but speaking what you feel to the community triggers a particular vulnerability, such as what if they reject what I've built inside, what I know, my expertise, what I say, and your body may tighten at the throat when asked to speak in larger spaces. So the shadow of this energy could be you sticking to your familiar circles or smaller circles, not wanting to speak to larger groups, instead of letting your voice reach the collective that it's meant to serve. This water trine is asking you to stand up, right? Or you could overspeak, feeling every silence, turning third house, the need for it to grow and expand into noise instead of signal, and saying things that really actually matter, just feeling it with shallow conversation. And the fire trine in July 2027 brings an interesting inversion. Jupiter moves into the 4th house while Saturn enters your 12th house, right? And what your voice built in community is now landing as internal wealth, because you've worked with your emotions, you stopped and filled, and then you put those feelings into action. So the foundation you've built by doing this, working with your emotions and feeding others with, can now feed you. So the first practice is choose one form of writing or speaking: a newsletter, a local class, a conversation series, a podcast, whatever it is, and commit to it monthly from August 2026 through to April 2027. Make sure you do it consistently, regularly, not perfectly. The second practice is identify the collective dream you have kept private, the community vision, the long-term hope you haven't spoken aloud. With Saturn in your 11th, it's asking you to structure it, write it, give it a timeline. The red flags that you can see right now will be staying comfortable in one-to-one connections, relationships, conversations, while avoiding community contribution and intellectualizing, your voice and the things you want to say instead of letting it carry actual feelings and expressing your feelings. The green lights of this energy is discovering your words kind of land differently when spoken from genuine rootedness, and finding a community that feeds your energy, your foundation, rather than takes away and depletes it, right? So for Gemini, Sun, Moon and Rising, the water trine activates your 2nd house of money, values, self-worth, material resources, what you own and what owns you, and because of Jupiter being in Cancer, and your 10th house of career, public reputation, authority, and the work that you are known for, because Saturn's in Pisces, right? So resources and reputation, your wealth, and your worth and work are the key themes for you. So the question this water trine, fire trine, 14 months is asking you is, are you building a career that reflects your actual values, or a reputation that has nothing to do with what you believe your life is for. And by the time you get to the fire trine in July 2027, Jupiter is in your third house of voice, ideas, communication, and the natural house of Gemini Mercury energy, right? So it's at home here. And Saturn's in your 11th house, community and collective and vision, right? So your resources and work become voice and movement. So Gemini, your mind can move faster than almost any other sign, right? You're flexible, curious, articulate. You can, process and frame anything in the language that makes it land right and engaging when you're at your best, right? And the water trine asks you to slow down and ask what you actually value, right? And Jupiter in your second house expands your resources, but Cancer means that expansion comes through emotional honesty about what nourishes you, feeds your soul, gives it energy materially, not just about what you can accumulate and actually just buying everything, though it wants you to think about what you buy over this time and make sure it's things that raise your energy, makes your life better, and is in line with your personality, right? And Saturn in your 10th house is a significant transit. Career, routines and habits are being disciplined, tested and formalized. So if your professional reputation has been built on flexibility without depth, right, being deep, basically, Saturn will ask for substance, right, for you to go deep, for you to, make sure you're doing a career that is in line with your values, as I said earlier. So if you've been building genuine mastery, Saturn will reward it now. And the somatic signature for Gemini under this transit is nervous energy that can be localized in your hands and your shoulders, and this is the body wanting to do 10 things when the transit requires doing one thing with full commitment, right? The shadow of this energy is building a career, a reputation that looks aligned with values without internal coherence. So it's important that you do the things that actually bring you joy and are in line with your actual values, right? So you can find yourself, performing, doing work that's purposeful and has a meaning, while privately feeling empty. So again, it's important during this 40 months to ask yourself, is the career you're doing, what you're doing with your life in all areas, especially in all 3rd house stuff, right, 4th house stuff and 11th house stuff and 10th house stuff, your career, right? Is it feeding you? Is it filling you up? Is it giving you energy, right? And if it's not, then think about how you can, fill the gap, bring more joy and happiness and balance and energy and align what you do with your values. And of course, you don't need to rush and make the changes. You've got 14 months to do so, right? So the fire trine in July 2027 moves Jupiter into your 3rd house, which is, as I said, your natural home, Gemini energy. So your voice, can grow, you can speak more ideas, they can increase your ideas, and your communication can become your manifestation gift through practical action, right? It's not just about, saying I want this without doing the work. And Saturn gives you the discipline to follow through in your actions, right? And with Saturn in your 11th house, it gives community, structure to all that you say and do, right? So what you built in career during the water trine period from August 2026 right up until April 2027 now becomes community leadership through fire by the time we get into July 2027, right? So in terms of actionable guidance for you guys, the first practice is a monthly audit. So August 2026 to April 2027, ask yourself, does your income reflect your values? It doesn't have to reflect it perfectly, but practically one change per month towards alignment will do. Don't rush to do everything at once and burn out. Do everything slowly. The key is to take action, right, but not to do too much. The second practice is identify what mastery you're building in your career, what expertise, right? not your title, not your brand, but what do you actually know that serves you, you know, so your professional skills, your education, you know, so you may think about updating your skills, I don't know, by reading books, attending courses, learning on your own, you know. The red flags of this energy is, you know, building a professional reputation that requires performing values you don't actually hold, letting adaptability substitute for commitment. The green lights during this time is, you know, work that increasingly feels coherent with what you value, and what you earn reflects what you care about, right? The voice you develop by July 2027 has substance, you know, longevity, because it's real, and you've done the 2nd and 10th house work, right? Thinking about why you spend what you spend and why you do the job that you do, and aligning it with your values. For Cancer, Sun, Moon and Rising, the water trine places Jupiter in your 1st house of self, body, identity, the face you sold to the world, and Saturn in your 9th house, philosophy, higher learning, belief systems, long distance travel, and the teacher within are all activated. So this is a deep personal transit for you. Jupiter in your 1st house grows your very self, expands it, your presence, your sense of possibility, your embodied lived in identity, your sense of self. And Saturn in your 9th house test the philosophies that you live by. The mantle wisdom actually holds weight, you know, what you know is actually valuable, and it is stuff you actually know and believe, rather than just things you say because you were told to believe them, right? And the fire trine in July 27 changes Jupiter to your 2nd house of values, resources and money, and Saturn to your 10th house of career, public, reputation, and, you know, your sort of like expanded self becomes visible work now. And Cancer, because you are ruled by the moon, cynical, feeling based, you change every 2.5 days, the moon does, right? So it can make you very open to feelings and naturally in tune with your feelings, protective of your inner world, right, beneath your hard shell. And Jupiter in your 1st house is a rare gift of expansion of the self, not external growth first, but you first. Your body may fill out, your presence may become more noticeable, and your confidence may surprise you in quiet moments. This isn't performance, it's ripening. And Saturn in your 9th house is the counterbalance. Your beliefs are being audited. The philosophy you use to make sense of yourself, is it actually serving you, or is it inherited, borrowed or adopted to please a parent, teacher or partner who needed you to believe a certain way? And Saturn in the 9th house strips belief down to what you can actually live out, you know, in your day-to-day actions. And the shadow, the Cancer specific shadow here, is using nurturing philosophy, saying things like, I believe in caring for others, as cover for not caring for yourself, right? So looking after yourself, nurturing yourself, taking care of your psychological, emotional, spiritual needs are really important over the 14 months of this trine, right? And, you know, remember that growth starts inward first, and the somatic signature for Cancer is, you know, your chest tightening, and maybe stomach sensitivity when your self expansion, when growing, you know, becoming more yourself, growing yourself feels unsafe. So it's important to, you know, provide yourself with a safe space. And when you're asked to take up more space, more presence, more confidence, more identity, the body may brace as if growth means exposure, but stay with the expansion expansion and the growth, continue to grow and work on yourself. And as the fire trine crystallizes in July 2027, when Jupiter moves into your second house of self-worth, your self-worth can become more material, practical and visible, and your values become resources. And Saturn moves to your 10th house. Your public work gets more structure and recognition, and the person you become during the water trine now has visible work in the world also, so it's about putting yourself forward, using this trine over the 14 months to get more comfortable with yourself. And of course, you're all with Cancer, Sun, Moon or Rising, or a lot of Cancer energy in your chart will choose to do this in different ways, but it's about, allowing yourself to grow and be comfortable with yourself and healing yourself first, and taking the time out to look after your own emotions, not just others, and knowing what's your responsibility is and what others' responsibilities are, right? So in terms of the practices you can do, the first practice is each month of the water trine, do one thing that grows your sense of self, not for others, not for community, purely for your own becoming, and document it. Whether you write about it, voice note about it, vlog about it, whatever, document it. The second practice is write your actual philosophy, your beliefs, not what you were taught to believe, what you actually believe, tested against what you've lived from your own experience. So looking back on your life experiences and thinking about what they have taught you and what you now believe because of them, right? And Saturn in the 9th house rewards intellectual honesty and all types of honesty, right? The red flags here is hiding your expanded self behind nurturing others, expanding outwardly, so caring, giving and nourishing to others, while contracting, making yourself smaller inwardly, not receiving, not being, not nurturing yourself, not looking after your psychological, physical and emotional needs, right? The green lights that you will experience is a growing sense that you can fully exist, not just in relationship to others, building a belief system, a philosophy that can hold your actual lived experience, that's built on your lived experience, right? Not just the version you've created or the version that others have told you to be, right? So for Leo, Sun, Moon and Rising, the water trine places Jupiter in your 12th house of the unconscious, spiritual practice, endings, hidden matters, self-undoing, and Saturn in your 8th house of death, transformation, shared resources, depth and psychological awareness and other people's money. So this is the two most intense houses of the zodiac, and they're both being activated at the same time for you. The 12th house is where you dissolve, the 8th house is where you transform. When the fire trine arrives in July 2027, Jupiter moves to your 1st house of identity, presence, the whole self, and Saturn moves to your 9th house of philosophy, belief and wisdom. So what you dissolved and transformed in the water trine from August 2026 to April 2027 comes out, emerges as a radiant identity and living philosophy in fire, or this is what should happen. So, Leo, you are the sun, you're ruled by the sun. It's about being yourself, boldly shining, being radiant, visible, and being creative, owning yourself, being independent, taking the lead, having that glow, right? These are your natural elements, which is exactly why the water trine is the most demanding phase for you personally. With Jupiter in your 12th house, wants you to withdraw into yourself, into the invisible, into your emotional world, and Saturn in your 8th house demands you to go to the psychological depths, right? Going deep, thinking about what you have been avoiding, what other people may hold over you, secrets, other things, resources, thinking about what said resources, financial or emotional, are operating as unconscious control. This is the transit that works behind the scenes. You will not see it performing. You will not post about it easily. And the 12th house expansion is the interior. Dreams can be more vivid. Spiritual hunger can, be alive and intensifying, and you can have a pull towards retreating within you, wanting more solitude and practice. And the 8th house Saturn is asking you to dig deep. So old wounds around power, control, intimacy, death, literal or symbolic death, right? Money held by others, the version of yourself that no longer belongs to this chapter of your life. And the somatic signature for Leo is, you may feel it in your back. It could tighten, and your solar plexus, and your body can withdraw your creative fire inward instead of expressing yourself outwardly for a deeper purpose. So you can become more a bit less dramatic if you are that way, not wanting to be so public, wanting to spend time alone. And it may be scary for you, but you have to remember this is not depletion, it's direct conservation, allowing you to conserve, to build up your energy, and to take time out to plan and think about what you really want. The shadow is interpreting this transit as failure, trying to perform during a period meant for you to let go and dissolve, forcing visibility when the growth is underground, working with your emotional, spiritual and psychological health, and taking time out in solitude. And by the time you get to the fire trine in July 2027, this is your renaissance, right? This is when you get your glow up and you show up and you show out. Jupiter is in the first house, the king returning, or queen or whatever. And the king, the person who's been to the underworld, transformed, or, not performing but transformed. You've been there, you've gone to the depths of the soul, you know what you want, you're ready to show out and be the main character in your life story for the first time or again. And Saturn in your 9th house gives that return, a belief system, a philosophy, a teaching, a wisdom, a process, a framework that can last, right? So in terms of actionable guidance for you, the first practice you can do, Leo, is establish a genuine private spiritual practice during August 2026. Make sure it's daily, make sure it's unglamorous, it's not for social media or anything like that, not photographed, not documented for anyone but yourself. It's personal to you. Let something be sacred and belong only to you. The second practice is to audit, to look at your shared resources and power dynamics in your significant relationships. Where is someone else's authority operating in your life, or are you, sort of that controlling others' lives? Can you give back that control? Thinking about the ways that you may take power from others when you should take it from within, right? And what are you hiding, in terms of facing within yourself that makes you think that you may need to hide your power or reclaim it from others and all of that. So Saturn in the 8th house is about naming what needs to be healed, right? What needs to be changed. The red flags for you during this time is you forcing visibility during the water phase to escape the discomfort of the 12th house of wanting you to deal with any addictions, any secrets, any lies, any hidden enemies, your feelings, right? Or any dramatic 8th house crises, financial, relationship problems, psychological issues triggered by avoidance of you not wanting to work with your shadow or work with your emotional, psychological and spiritual wounds, right? The green light is emerging from the water trine with a depth, going deep, that changes the quality of your presence, right? And by July 2027, your radiance is real because it's earned from you going down, descending into your feelings and work, doing the inner work, right? So yeah, that's you, Leo. Now, Virgo, Sun, Moon and Rising, the water trine places Jupiter in your 11th house of community, collective vision, social networks, long-term hopes, friendships. and Saturn's in your 7th house of partnerships, marriage, significant one-on-one relationships and open contracts, community and partnership, the collective and the intimate kind of like relationship dyads, right? So the water trine asks, are your most significant relationships supporting the collective work you're meant to do, or operating as a competing kind of structure and thing in your life, right? That's taking away from you serving others or doing the work that you feel like you're here to do. And the fire trine in July 27 moves Jupiter to the 12th house of dissolution, spiritual deepening, rest, and Saturn to your 8th house of transformation, shared resources, and going deep psychologically. And after community and partnership work, the spiral wants you to move inward, looking within, thinking about what needs healing, what needs balancing there. So, Virgo, you analyse and serve with extraordinary focus and precision. Your nervous system is finely tuned to everything that could go wrong, could be improved, or could be done more efficiently. And the water trine offers two sort of like teachings. Jupiter in your 11th house expands your community, new networks, more people, bigger collective visions than you typically allow yourself. And Saturn in your 7th house demands that your one-on-one relationships become more honest, more committed, and more formally understood. Verbal agreements are becoming explicit, implicit expectations are becoming spoken. So it's about getting real about what you and others expect from your relationships, and having it formalized rather than just explicitly expecting things, but it's not formal, right? It hasn't been said. So stating boundaries and sort of like sticking to boundaries as well. And the specific tension for you here is between the 11th house demand for growing your community and the 7th house demand for going deeper in your kind of like significant intimate relationships, right? So the attention you may have to give to work and helping others, and the attention you need to give to your personal one-on-one relationships. The shadow for you over the 14 months of this trine, right, that is trying to build your empire finally, your world, your goals once and for all, is using detailed service to stay near people without the vulnerability or genuine intimacy, or the opposite, being so focused on your intimate partnerships that community vision never gets your actual investment, so you neglect your social relationships or commitments or the things you want to do for the collective. So the somatic signature for Virgo under this transit is digestive sensitivity and hand-arm tension, the body holding the pressure of multiple relationship demands at the same times. The body's message, you cannot serve everyone at the depth each requires, and Saturn in the 7th house is asking you to choose not forever but for this season. The fire trine in July 2027 moves both planets inward, Jupiter to your 12th house and Saturn to your 8th house. The community and partnership work you did on water now requires internal integration. So the spiritual practice is psychological transformation. What you built for others must now be digested by you. So the first practice is to choose one partnership, romantic, business, teamwork, and bring one unspoken expectation into conversation straightforwardly, stating the needs, rather than, just expecting it, not saying it, as we can do in relationships sometimes, before April 2027. And if you do this, Saturn in the 7th house will reward you having boundaries, sticking to others' boundaries, and getting clear on the expectations in your relationships, right? The second practice is identifying the collective vision you keep deferring, straying away from, putting off? Is it too big, too impractical, too exposed? Jupiter in the 11th is asking you to, get real, make the structures, but begin things anyway. Don't put things off, to do the things that you've been putting off when it comes to working collectively. For some of you, it's going for that promotion. For some of you, it's starting your own social enterprise, something like that. It's asking you to begin anyway, imperfectly, with others, and to know that you can find the solutions. The main thing is starting right. The red flags to watch out for is using surface as a tool to keep distance in your relationships, and analysing partnerships instead of inhabiting them, living them, growing with them, working with them. The green lights of this energy is a partnership that feels genuinely mutual, a community initiative that grows beyond your sort of like careful control and works anyway. It's asking you to go with the flow a little bit and work with your feelings during the 14 months of the trine between Saturn and Jupiter Virgo. Okay, so for Libra, Sun, Moon and Rising. So the water trine places Jupiter in your 10th house of career, public reputation, authority, the work you are known for, your legacy, and Saturn in the 6th house of daily work, health practices, service routines, the body's relationship to labour, reputation and routine, legacy and discipline daily, right? The 10th house is where you are seen. The 6th house is the invisible daily work that makes being seen sustainable. So the fire trine in July 2027 changes Jupiter to your 11th house, right? Community and collective vision, and Saturn to your 7th house, partnership, contracts and significant relationships. Your career foundation becomes a community offering. Your daily discipline becomes a relationship structure. So, Libra, you understand aesthetics, how things should look and how we should say and do things to bring balance into our lives, the art of relationships, and you have more instinctive inner grace than most. Some people can say you're a bit codependent or people pleasing, so it's important to find that balance, but what looks good, how to say things right and all of that. The challenge with Libra is decision making, choosing, claiming and committing to one direction without the reassurance of everyone's approval. And Jupiter in your 10th house expands career and public reputation during the water trine. This is visible growth, opportunities for recognition, authority and professional growth that actually land. But Saturn in your 6th house demands the unglamorous costs, daily work, health practices, routine and discipline. The reputation Jupiter is expanding, which is the 10th house, must be earned by what Saturn requires, which is the 6th house, no shortcuts. The body is part of this equation. Saturn in the 6th house brings health into focus as a non-negotiable structure. What daily practices actually sustain your capacity to do the work your 10th house is being asked to do, so looking at your day-to-day habits and thinking, are they in line with your long-term goals and your career goals, because that's what the 10th house is all about, your public reputation and your career, right? Do your daily habits actually align with your 10th house work goals and all of that? So the somatic signature for Libra is, feeling tension in your kidneys and lower back, the body carrying the weight that, seeking balance and having balance in your life demands. You may feel pulled in multiple directions between your career growth and your daily habits, right? And the shadow to this is performing career authority without, having a structured day-to-day sort of like habits and life and routines to actually hold the space for your career authority. So you perform it instead of having it. So your reputation outruns the reality of your day-to-day life. You're performing, you're not being real, so it's important to make sure that your day-to-day habits are helping you, be sort of competent and an expert in your career of choice and all of that. You having authority instead of performing having authority. So making sure you're getting enough sleep, your relationships are in balance, they're not codependent, you're not giving too much, you're not taking too much, making sure your psychological, emotional, spiritual, financial and physical needs are balanced, right? And as the fire trine happens, as we get into July 2027 and moves to your 11th house, your career can become a community resource if you've worked with your feelings and you've sort of like looked at what's imbalanced in your life and brought more balance to those areas. So with Jupiter in your 11th house and Saturn in your 7th house, your work now creates networks if you've brought balance into it, right? And your partnerships become more formally structured, right? So, it wants you to build a path that's complete. So, your reputation, bringing discipline into your day-to-day life and being of service to your community, right? So in terms of practices for you to do, practice 1 is identify one daily health or work practice you've been avoiding and commit to it for the duration of the water trine. Because with Saturn in the 6th house, right, it's non-negotiable about the need to build a daily routine and to have more structure in your life, right? While, Saturn's in your 6th house during August 2026 and April 2027. The second is to name the professional authority you're being called into and take one solid concrete step forward towards doing it each month, building a habit to, build that expertise or to learn that skills that you need or to reclaim and empower yourself if you've already got the skills to trust yourself to use them, right? And be the authority instead of, performing it. And Jupiter in the 10th house rewards deliberate movement forward rather than waiting and not taking action, right? So the red flags to watch out for is taking on career opportunities that your daily structure cannot support, that your health is, it declines because you prioritize reputation over routine and looking after your emotional, physical and spiritual and psychological health, right? The green lights are career growth that feels grounded because the daily work that you do, your daily habits generally support your career, and recognition doesn't require performing, you own it, right, Libra? So that's your work for the next 14 months. So for Scorpio, Sun, Moon and Rising, the water trine places Jupiter in your 9th house of philosophy, higher learning, belief systems, long distance travel, teaching and publishing, and Saturn in your 5th house of creativity, children, romance, joy, self-expression and play, wisdom and pleasure, philosophy and creativity. So the 9th house is where you seek meaning, the 5th is where you experience life's joy, and both are being activated at the same time, which create unusual tension. Your search for truth must include your ability for joy, and your creative expression must be grounded in genuine wisdom. So the fire trine in July 2027 moves Jupiter to your 10th house and Saturn to your 6th house. 6th house rules daily work and health. 10th house is your career and reputation. So wisdom and joy become a visible professional legacy. So Scorpio, you go deep by nature, intensity is your element, transformation is your habit, and the water trine activates 2 different energies for for you. Jupiter in your ninth expands, grows your beliefs and philosophical opinions and spiritual horizons. Travel, literal or intellectual, higher learning, belief systems are being stretched, asking for you to expand. Jupiter is the planet of growth and expansion, right? And you can become a teacher, or a teacher can arrive in your life. And Saturn in your fifth is the paradox, structuring joy, disciplining creativity, making consistent what has previously arrived only as inspiration. So, the specific rune for Scorpios, right, in this transit, being in your fifth house, is using intensity to avoid lightness, to avoid play and being being playful. Got there finally, right? So using psychological depth and deepness to avoid play. The fifth house asks for something Scorpio finds genuinely difficult: delight without purpose, creativity without it meaning anything deep. Saturn here isn't making joy grim, it's asking joy to become reliable, to not disappear when life gets difficult, to be practiced, maintained, chosen. So the somatic signature is solar plexus guarding and reproductive area tension. Saturn holds both will, the solar plexus, and creative life force, the fifth house energy, in the body's core, right? And this transit may bring up what you have withheld, either and why you've withheld it, right? And the fire trine in July 2027 changes both planets outward, Jupiter to your 10th house, Saturn to the 6th house, right? The philosophy and creative discipline you've built privately now becomes professional legacy. The wisdom, teaching, publishing and sharing, it has a structure, form and a deep practice behind it. So in terms of actionable guidance, the first practice is to commit to one creative practice that has no purpose beyond the experience of making it. Monthly for the water trine, as long as it lasts, commit to that creative practice without no purpose. Just do it for fun, right? The experience of doing it, being it, creating it. You don't need to share it, right? It's just for you, or you can share if you want. The second practice is identify the philosophical teaching or belief system you keep circling. With Jupiter being in the 9th house, it's saying formalize it, study it, teach it. The red flags is using spiritual depth, deepness to avoid lightness and play, letting creative practice collapse when life gets serious. The green lights of this energy is a creative body of work that you produce over the 14 months that has genuine philosophical grounding and joy that doesn't disappear under pressure, right? So for Sagittarius, Sun, Moon and Rising, the water trine places Jupiter in your 8th house of transformation, shared resources, death and rebirth cycles, psychological deepness, other people's money and intimacy, and Saturn in your 4th house of home, emotional foundations, ancestry, the private self and your roots, right? And these are your most foundational and most transformational houses activated at the same time. The 8th house is where you let go. The 4th house is where you build the floor, the foundations, the newness, the home, your inner home, your actual home, beneath the 8th house, shedding, letting go. So as we move into the fire trine in July 2027, Jupiter moves into your 9th house of philosophy, higher learning and travel. And Sagittarius, this is where you live, right? Jupiter's here, Sagittarius naturally lives in the 9th house in the zodiac, so you're at home, your own natural domain, right? And Saturn moves to your 5th house of creativity, joy, self-expression, foundation and transformation become wisdom and creative joy. So Sagittarius, you are Jupiter's own sign, expansive, philosophical, freedom orientated. Jupiter rules you, right? And you are continuously seeking the bigger picture. The water trine sends your ruling planet into your 8th house, which is the least comfortable territory, area, space for Sagittarius energy. The 8th house asks for depth and intensity over, breadth, knowing everything and, going from one belief and one thing to the next. It wants you to surrender rather than grow, confronting what you rather philosophize away. Jupiter here, expands, grows, transformation, which means the things that need to end will end with unusual thoroughness, finality. Sometimes you can struggle to end things. Financial routines and habits that you share with others can get examined right now. Psychological patterns can get dug up, right? The shadow material that you've been outdistancing through travel, constant seeking of philosophies and belief systems, and changing philosophy and exchange, philosophy and belief systems, and how you can be overly optimistic. All of this comes up. Everything that you've been doing to avoid facing yourself and the truth comes up. And Saturn in your 4th house builds your emotional foundation. At the same time, you need to do the 8th house inner work of transforming, letting go of the things you need to let go of, right? And without a genuine 4th house floor, emotional safety, clarity about your family and what home means to you, your ancestral religions and all of that traditions, and making your home as a sanctuary. The 8th house transformation has nowhere to go, so make sure you do the work to stabilize or rebuild your inner home. Or for some of you may have to move home. You may decide that a relationship's holding you back, something's holding you back, but the challenge for you is resisting the confinement of both houses. You want to move, and both the 4th house that wants you to stay more at home or pay attention to your inner home and looking after your psychological, emotional, spiritual world and your feelings, right? And the 8th house that wants you to go deep, say stop running. So the somatic signature is hips and thighs. Sagittarius holds freedom in the lower body. This transit may bring up hip tightness and tension, in your joints and muscles, and sciatic tension, right? And your body can be literally unable to run from what needs to be faced, because you may have to slow down, so the fire trine, 2027, if you've done the inner work, will be your homecoming. Jupiter moves to your 9th house, your own natural house of philosophy, teaching, travel, but now it's sourced from genuine 8th house, going deep into yourself. You transform, you let go of what you needed to let go of, whether it's toxic behaviours, thoughts or relationships, and it's rooted in the 4th house. You've got more stability in your actual physical home or your inner home. The expansion should be real this time if you've done the work right. So how do you get there? The first practice is to stay, literally and metaphorically, during the water trine. Resist the urge to travel or change circumstances when discomfort comes up. The 8th and the 4th house both require presence. And the second practice is, do a financial or resource audit, or both, with a trusted advisor or yourself if you can be that real, right? As Saturn in the 4th house wants you to build a real foundation, right? So it could be paying off debt, getting more stable in your finances, thinking about the finances you share with others and stuff like that. Don't make the mistake of thinking philosophical optimism is like a stand-in for structural planning. You have to plan your resources and get real about what needs to be changed, or praising yourself for what you're doing while there. The red flags that you need to watch out for is using travel, philosophy or positivity to avoid 8th house material that's coming up, right? And running from home when home is actually where the work is. So working on your psychological, emotional and spiritual needs, and your financial and physical needs as well. The green light is, as you arrive in July 2027 with genuine psychological and emotional rootedness, you're not afraid to go deep and work work with emotions and your feelings and other people's feelings and emotions. And you know that ninth house growth of your belief system should have grown into something that comes from somewhere that's real, centered within yourself, right? Your emotional intelligence has grown, you feel more secure, and although you may, go back to traveling and wanting to do many things, you've got that inner core more stabilized, right, Sagittarius? So for Capricorn, the water trine places Jupiter in the 7th house of partnership, marriage, significant one-on-one relationships, open contracts, and Saturn in your 3rd house of communication, siblings, local community, the thinking mind and daily exchanges, right, and partnership and communication. So ultimately your relationship and your voice, right, under the spotlight. So the 7th house expands through others, the 3rd house builds through what you say and how you say it, so your relationships and voice, as I said. And as we go into the fire trine in July 2027, Jupiter changes to your 8th house of transformation, said resources, and Saturn to your 4th house of home, emotional foundation and roots, partnership and communication work in water during August 2026, and April 2027 becomes transformation and foundation building in fire. So Capricorn, Saturn is your ruler. You understand structure, discipline and long-term building at the cellular level. It's your domain, it's what you're naturally inclined to do. So what this trilogy does for you is allowing you to work through your relationships and use your voice, your less instinctive domains, right? Jupiter in your 7th house expands partnerships during the water trine. New significant relationships can enter, existing relationships can grow, the quality of your one-on-one intimacy deepening beyond what your careful Capricorn architecture, build-up, constitution and personality usually permits, right? And Saturn in your 3rd house of communication, your voice is being disciplined, not silenced, but made more precise, more honest, more connected to what you actually believe, rather than what is strategically advantageous for you to say. And the shadow of Capricorn energy in the 3rd house is using communication as management, saying what needs to be said to maintain structure rather than what's true. Saturn here is asking what happens when you speak the truth even when it disrupts. The somatic signature is knees and jaw, so Capricorn holds authority in the knees. Can you kneel? Can you bow? Can you acknowledge what you don't know yet? And, communication, the tension in your jaw, what are you not saying? Both may come up physically during this transit. And as you get into the fire trine in July 2027, Jupiter and Saturn goes into your 8th and 4th house. The partnerships you built during the water trine and the honest communication you develop now move into psychological transformation and emotional foundations, right? Wanting you to go deep after you've kind of spread yourself everywhere, right, with the 3rd house stuff. So in terms of actionable guidance, the first practice is, in one significant partnership, practice saying what is true rather than what is strategic. Monthly, one honest exchange that you would have previously managed rather than said. The second practice is to let one new partnership enter your life that is not instrumentally useful, a friendship, a mentorship or connection whose only purpose is genuinely meeting at the same emotional space or psychological spiritual space, or at the same level, mutual understanding. The red flags would be managing partnerships instead of living them, right, being with them, being present in them, using Saturn's 3rd house focus to control communication rather than liberate it and make it more free, and you be more free with your words and your emotions, right? The green lights during this time It's a relationship that genuinely surprises you with how deep it is, a voice that lands differently because it's more honest rather than strategic. So just allowing yourself to be more emotionally and communicatively intelligent and be open to sharing with others and getting outside of your comfort zone. Hey, Capricorn. So for Aquarius, Sun, Moon and Rising, the water trine places Jupiter in your 6th house of daily work, health practices, service routines, the body's relationship to work and all of that, and designing, creativity, and Saturn in your 2nd house of money, value, self-worth, material resources and what you own. So daily discipline and your material kind of day-to-day habits foundation, right? The 6th house is the unglamorous engine. The 2nd house is what the engine is building towards, right? So, you know, the 6th house, the work that we do can buy us our material wealth, resources, homes, possessions, food and all of that, right? So when Jupiter and Saturn move into fire signs, Jupiter into Leo, Saturn into Aries in July 2027, Jupiter moves into the 7th house of relationships and Saturn to your 3rd house of community and voice. Daily work and material foundations become relational, and communicative expression becomes more under the focus spotlight for you guys. So Aquarius, you are orientated towards the collective systems, thinking systems, processing, humanitarian vision, how you can look after the collective or do things that influence the collective and the future. Your challenge is embodying, living the vision in the present moment in the day-to-day habits, right? And the water trine lands you precisely there. If you use this energy how you meant to, this is what you will do. Jupiter in the 6th house expands your relationship to daily work, creativity and your health and your sort of like expertise, your craft, right? Your skill set and your mindset. So, you know, for you, the growth needed is not into some grand Aquarian vision. It's into the routine that sustains, you know, your vision over time, makes your vision last, right? You must look after the engine, not just describe the destination. So Saturn in your 2nd house at the same time is building a material foundation, money, resources and self-worth all being structured and tested at the same time. And the shadow here for you, Aquarius, to watch out for is devaluing material worth because you're orientated towards collective ideals, maybe saying things like money doesn't matter, ideas do. But Saturn in the 2nd is firm. Your ideas require a material foundation to persist, you know, for you to make money from them, right? Your service requires a sustainable income to continue. Your worth includes the material, whether you prefer it or not. So the somatic signature for Aquarius, where you feel it in your body, is your ankles, which is what Aquarius rules, right? And lower legs, the foundation of your mobility. And this transit may bring ankle instability, leg circulation issues, or alternatively a new groundedness in the lower body. You feel grounded, you may do yoga, tai chi, stretching exercises, squats, stuff like that, as the 6th house and the 2nd house work builds actual roots, making you feel more grounded and secure in your body, right? And by the time you get to the fire trine in July 2027, it moves into this trine moves into your 7th house. This is where Jupiter is, right, and Saturn into your area of communication. So the daily discipline and material foundation you built in water now expresses as significant relationships and a powerful voice. The Aquarian vision now has both the material ground and the relationship network to carry it. So in terms of actionable practice, build one daily practice that directly serves your physical health, not a system, not a philosophy, but a body-specific routine, maintained Monday through to Sunday, not 24/7, but do it every day, right? Because Saturn in the 6th house rewards consistency over perfection. The second practice is to conduct a genuine money audit. What do you earn? What do you spend? What does the structure, the audit reveal about your actual values, looking into where you spend money, where you save money and all the rest of it, how you could earn more money, because Saturn in the 2nd house asks for honesty, not same, right? So, be gentle with yourself if you're not doing as well as you want to financially or anything like that. It's asking you, to be honest, not same. Life is ebbs and flows, but to just get real about how you can save or how you could earn more. The red flags here is using collective vision as an excuse to neglect personal material foundations, right? Treating body care as secondary to intellectual or community work. The green light here is a daily practice that genuinely sustains, it lasts, and enhances, increases your ability to serve yourself and others. And the material sort of like base foundation, goals, savings, income that gives your ideas actual legs, so if you, for instance, want to do spiritual practice, finding a way that you can monetize it in an ethical way. So yeah, that's the guidance for you during this water and fire trine between Jupiter and Saturn, Aquarius. So for Pisces, Sun, Moon and Rising, the water trine places Jupiter in your 5th house of creativity, joy, romance, children, self-expression, play, and Saturn in your 1st house of self, body, identity, and the face you show to the world, joy and identity, creative expression, and the embodied self. The 5th house is what delights you. The 1st house is who you are. The water trine asks, can your joy and your identity become the same thing? Can your creative expression start being something you do and become something you are? And as Jupiter and Saturn move into fire signs in July 2027, and Jupiter moves to your 6th house of daily work, service and health, and Saturn to your 2nd house of values, resources and your material foundation, your creative identity becomes a long-lasting service, or that's what it should do if you do the work of working with your feelings, what the water trine wants you to do in August 2026 and April 2027. So Pisces, you are the ocean, boundless, feeling everything, able to dissolve and let go into any form the moment requires and the situation requires. Saturn in your 1st house during the water trine is the most significant placement. Structure coming directly to your identity, discipline, focus and routine coming to your identity, your body, your sense of self, your presentation in the world are all being asked to become more defined, more boundaried, more specifically you, rather than the fluid reflection of whoever is near. So sometimes Pisces energy can mirror others, be codependent. It's asking you to find out and be who you truly are, and this can be challenging for Pisces because the definition feels like loss. If I choose this identity, I lose all others, and Saturn says precisely, and in that choosing you're becoming real. Jupiter in your 5th house at the same time grows your creative joy, self-expression, romance, play and creative output. The combination is unusual. Structure your identity while expanding your creative happiness. The integration is let your creative joy and happiness define your identity. Let what you love tell who you are, so who you are and all of that. And the somatic signature for Pisces is feet, and the overall sense of physical boundary. So where does your body end and the environment begin is a question to ask, and Saturn in the 1st house may bring unexpected clarity to this question, including a stronger physical presence, a more defined body sense, or an increased awareness of where you dissolve into others' energy fields and need grounding to stop doing that, to step into your own energy. The shadow shadow of this for Pisces is using creativity to escape your identity and defining yourself and, expressing yourself, making beautiful art while refusing to claim your personal expression and identity, first, or the identity of an artist, expressing love whilst refusing to embody and be the lover and live the lover, right? The trilogy asks for both. The fire trine in July moves Jupiter to your 6th house and Saturn to your 2nd. The creative identity you built now finds its daily surface expression and material foundation. What you love becomes what you do. What you do becomes sustainably valued if you do the work, right? So in terms of actionable guidance, name your identity in one domain, the artist, the healer, the teacher, the builder, and practice introducing yourself that way for the duration of the water trine, so from August 2026 to April 2027, and notice what within you resist this, right? The resistance is Saturn's teaching. The second practice is choose one creative practice and commit to it with monthly consistency, not when inspired but on schedule. Saturn in the 1st house revolves showing up as yourself even without the feeling when you're having an off day, when you just can't be bothered, The red flags of this energy is dissolving your energy, letting go of your identity and mirroring whoever is near by, not being your true self, using spiritual fluidity and flow to avoid the specificity that Saturn in the 1st house is building, right? The green lights is a creative practice that feels genuinely like self-expression rather than self-erasure, our identity that can be named without feeling like a betrayal of the rest, working with others and being able to relate to others, right? So being and expressing your own energy, Pisces. So yes, that's the end of the zodiac guidance and the end of this first part, where we have talked about the 3 chapters, talked about what a water trine is, what Jupiter Trine Saturn is, the energies involved, the water of Pisces and Cancer, the fire of Aries and Leo. And in part 2, I'm going to talk about the wound and the shadow of this trine in more depth. Also, the shadow of these 3 chapters in more depth. Also exploring the Sabian symbols and that sacral wisdom in more depth, and how you can use this to develop your career, development and relationships, giving more actionable guidance and 6 practices, how you can look after your health and body, giving you reflection prompts and going into the timeline in a little bit more detail. So yeah, if you just want this, that's the end of part 1. In part 2, we're going to talk more about the practicalities. So yes, I'm Imani, your holistic karmic astrological life coach, and it's been my pleasure. Take care and see you next time.